What is up, card fighters? It's Devlin Cassidy, aka The Scholar, and welcome to the first installment of Premium 101, an introduction to Cardfight Vanguard's premium format. Today, I'm going to give you some guidance on what clan would be best for you, as I go over all 24 clans in Cardfight Vanguard and provide you 3 deck lists for each of those clans. Now, make sure to check the fighters rules and future premium content not only on this channel, but on Kingslayer Card's channel as well, as times change with premium given ban lists and future support. I just want to help you be the most ready equipped to dive into your premium journey. But with that being said, make sure you kick back, relax, and get ready for all of the possibilities you have in Cardfight Vanguard Premium. One quick thing I want to clarify before we get into Premium is an overarching mechanic that a lot of standard only players probably haven't seen yet, and that's the imaginary gift mechanic from the V series. There are 3 gift types in Vanguard, being Force, Excel, and Protect, and each clan has their own specific gift that they can acquire and have been pre-assigned to. All of these can be found on cards that have the imaginary gift icon, and we will cover that in each of these deck logs. To explain though what these gift types do, there are 2 gift types inside of each gift type, if that makes sense. So for Force 1 allows a rearguard on that circle that the Force marker goes to, kind of like a Dragon Tree marker, to get plus 10,000 power during your turn. However, these force markers can stack, so if you get multiple force markers and you place them all in the same rearguard circle, that power scales. So if you have 2 force markers, that unit gets plus 20,000 power during your turn. If there's 4 markers, it gets plus 40,000 during your turn, etc, etc. Now Force 2, however, gives the unit on that rearguard circle, or on any circle for that matter, base 2 critical. This is to prevent the critical from stacking. So if you have multiple Force 2s on one circle, unfortunately that unit's base crit is 2 forever. They just can't stack given the wording since it's not crit plus 1. However, it's still very powerful in clans like DP that get very large numbers when they have access to Force 2. Their swings threaten a lot more pressure with that additional critical. Moving on to Excel, we have Excel 1, and Excels generate additional rearguard circles. These are extra zones for your cards to go to, so you have more aggro and can go even more wide on your opponent. Excel 1 is an additional rearguard circle that gives a unit plus 10,000 power during your turn. However, Excel 2, and arguably the best marker in this entire game, draws you a card when it's generated, and then gives the rearguard on that circle plus 5,000 power. So 10,000 power or drawn plus 5k. I'll take the draw any day, baby. And then finally, Protect. Protect 1 adds a perfect guard to your hand, but unlike the D-Series PGs that can be free, this is still a traditional Sentinel where you still have to discard a card for cost to get the effect for a no-hit. While this is very strong, there's also the underutilized Protect 2 that's slowly making a resurgence because of the new History Collection strides. Protect 2 only can go on a rearguard circle, but it gives that unit plus 5k both during your opponent's turn and your turn, and when that unit intercepts, it gets plus 10,000 shield, and both of those increments stack. So it's very strong when you have 2 Protect 2s and a Grade 2, and that Grade 2 can intercept for 25k. Now that you know what the gift types do, let's get rolling with Royal Paladin. So we are here starting with Royal Paladin, and we're starting with the Blasters archetype, everyone's tried and true favorite that comes from Aichi Sendo from the original Vanguard series. And you guys have probably seen some of these cards from D-Series. As we look around, we obviously see, the D-Series Blaster Blade and other things like that. So let's kind of go over what Blasters aims to achieve. So Blasters is a Force clan, and this is the denotation of what you can see. When you're looking at V-Series cards, this is how you can identify what imaginary gift type the clan possesses, because these are going to be the same throughout. No Royal Paladin card is going to have Excel or Protect on it. Royal Paladin is a Force clan. The Blasters deck chooses more times than not always the Force 1 gift type, because you're locked into gift types once you declare the one you want to use. And so this goes Force 1 because MLB's effect lets you get 2 imaginary gift forces, so you can just really get really large numbers the more times you can activate Majesty Lord's Blaster's effect skill. This deck I kind of classify as an aggro deck because your goal is to kind of get a large stack of force markers under a Blaster Blade here, and then using cards in the deck such as Floral Paladin Flogel, you're able to restand this Blaster Blade multiple times, and if you drive check a crit on it, Like if you hit crits and just pass it to this like big blaster blade, let's say you have like 3 force markers under it, a 40k blaster blade or a 50k blaster blade with 2 crit is pretty threatening. Another thing to note here is that you probably have not seen if you're very new to Premium is this Legion mechanic. Legion was very old back in I think 2017. If I remember off the top of my head correctly, or 2015. Yeah, 2015, the Legion mechanic came around. And this card, essentially, you get to have 2 cards on your Vanguard circle, and you add the powers together. So Seeker, Thing Saber, Dragon, Legions to Blaster Blade, Seeker. And so you have both of those effects active on your Vanguard circle, and overall it's just a pretty powerful effect. So that way you're just able to recycle cards to your deck, because to fulfill the Legion cost, you have to send 4 cards from your drop zone back to deck, which all of them can be triggers. It's really good. So that's why overall it's just like, it's pretty powerful. The red OT here because you just want to multi-attack and be aggressive, so I think this is an absolutely correct choice. Again, shout out to, you know, KSC CEO Richard Garcia for providing me this list, for he is a Royal Paladin main. The power of Royal Paladin really comes through, and we're going to talk about this stride a lot. This is Holy Dragon Crystal Luster Dragon. This card is like the premier for Royal Paladin, because all the cards from the V series and most like Royal Paladin decks in general love their grade 3 Vanguard effects, especially in the V series. They became very Vanguard centric in how their skills and things interacted, because a lot of their Vanguards actually did not get rearguard effects. So Crystal Luster being able to be a stride copy version of your grade 3s is very powerful. So what he does is that you can turn a card from your G zone face up. Till the end of turn, this unit gets all the abilities of your heart card. So then you're able to actually use Crystal Luster to become a stride version of MLB, and then you get to activate MLB's effects of the Blaster Blade. Blaster Dragon gets plus 5k and a drive, so it can get a crit. So essentially it gets a crit, a drive, and plus 5k. So it's actually a 33k stride with quad drive and a crit, which is very powerful. And then when it attacked, you can put 2 rearguards in your soul and get 2 imaginary gift forces to make the card even stronger if you want, or you just get your rears bigger. So Crystal Luster, definitely the MVP of this deck. We'll definitely want to highlight some of the other strides. This Gancelot can give your pieces resist. So having your cards not be able to be interacted with by your opponent's G-Guards and things, which we'll cover when we get into other clans, is very important. So overall, yeah, just a very, very strong deck. Very, very fun if you're like love the nostalgia of Vanguard. Playing with Blaster Blade, you can't get a better feeling with. So overall, more specifics in this list are just very strong, but definitely an aggro deck for sure. And if you read some of the cards here, all of these deck logs are going to be in a Google Doc in the description below with all of the deck codes. So there will be a plethora of them for you to choose from. Moving then on next into Alt Mile here. So Alt Mile is the main grade 3 from the G series of Vanguard. And personally, actually like one of my favorite Royal Paladin decks. I love Alt Mile. Alt Mile is very fun. And so like pairing it with Crystal Luster, which we see we play 2 copies of down here, is something else very interesting. And that is Aerial Divine Knight's V-Series Alt Mile skill. So this actually has a very cool way to where you can actually utilize like both gift types, not at the same time, but you can actually lock your opponent out at 3 damage if you get like multiple Force 2s and like you can ride into this card. Then since you'll have probably an Alt Mile and Soul, you get to get a crit early that way, and that way to do it is very, very powerful. So I think that this card is very good. And then its Vanguard skill is kind of last one, soul last one. You search your deck for up to grade 2 card, and you call it to a rearguard circle. You get to search your drop 2, so you get to call 2 grade 2s, and it's overall just powerful. So you can't scoff at that. But why this old Blue Sky Knight Alt Mile? Well, in History Collection, which we can cover now since it's the first deck we're getting to, is History Collection allowed you to actually stride now before you should really be able to stride. So it kind of gave every deck like a pseudo superior ride, which we'll get that too into the next into the third clan we cover in Gold Paladin. But what this does is so you can discard cards that are some grade 3 or greater from your hand that don't count toward the additional stride cost. This is important because you're fulfilling the cost of an axe skill, not the cost of a stride. And you get to stride on top of them if you meet the name requirement. So it needs a Blue Sky Knight Alt Mile, which there is a V-Series one, but the stipulation is that you did not get any imaginary gifts. Well, when you ride the V-Series Blue Sky Knight, you automatically get the gift, so you can't fulfill the cost via this, but if you ride the old one, you do. And because of Galblade, you actually get 2 gifts if you flip up a copy of himself, and this is why we play 2. And then his on attack is you get to search your deck for up to 1 grade 2 or greater card and call it to rear guard, then shuffle your deck. Well, Royal Paladin got blessed with a fantastic grade 2 promo called Calfadel, which is when it attacks while boosted, you can search up for 1 grade 2 card with a different card name from this unit, called to rear guard circle and shuffle your deck. So if you actually like filled a lot of CB, you can go like Leovaro and grab more. So you can do like actually a lot of multi-attack in this deck, and that's like the very strong highlight key point, which just makes this deck overall very, very strong. You have other accesses to like your no 0 damage gaming play is kind of this. So when your opponent gives you no counterblast, you can still go into the Aerial Divine Knight Alt Mile, the grade 4 version. If you're really damage starved, that's obviously an option. The reason you're able to play this is you can have up to 4 copies of this version of Alt Mile and up to 4 copies of this version of Alt Mile. So please don't think that, oh, I have 4 copies of this Alt Mile, I can't play the other 2. No. If they're 2 actual whole different units, they're different. So that's what makes it okay. So do not worry. Saint Twin Sword is okay too. It's when it attacks a Vanguard while boosted, you can counterblast 1 and turn a card face up in your G zone. You search your deck for up to 2 grade 2 cards and call them to rear and shuffle your deck. So you can call like a this guy and somebody else. Like just overall, there's a lot of cool combo lines that you can do inside this deck. And then we go for the value, since we are very aggressive. We like drop our hand on the board. We'd love to get some extra drive checks if we were able to. So this is why we play the Keter OT. But overall very strong, and again can use Crystal Luster. So like your main progression turns, or you want to go, if you're going first, you want to go into Galblade, get your additional force markers, then go into Alt Mile, ride the Aerial Divine Knight Alt Mile, and then go into Crystal Luster. So that is your main game plan there. Of course, there's plenty of cards, and again, the deck log is in that Google Doc that's in the description below. Then finally, we come to kind of the premier deck, what I would say is arguably the best deck in Royal Paladin. This is Jewel Knights. Jewel Knights is crazy. So most of the time, you hate having to call over your rear guards. Well, this is what Jewel Knights is all about. Jewel Knights have access to some of the most powerful cards in Royal Paladin, in my opinion. So much so that they only really stride Crystal Luster. It is Crystal Luster and go. So the awesome thing here is the main deck now revolves around Salome. And Salome is a card that says when a unit is placed on top of this unit circle, you can counterblast 1, give that unit that's placed on top of her plus 10k in a drive. This doesn't only work for riding, because a stride is placed. You can give your stride plus 10k in a drive. So you can give a Crystal Luster plus 10k in a drive check. So now it is a 38 with a quad drive. Very, very strong. But that's not the top end of this card. The top end of this card is, at the end of the battle this unit attack, you can counterblast 1, and you can call any number of cards with Jewel Knights and their card name from your hand, and you call them to rear guard with units. Then if you called 3 or more cards and your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, you can Soul Blast 4 and restand this unit, meaning you're restanding Crystal Luster. And notice that it doesn't say you lose drive checks. So if you're able to give her the placement effect, you're getting 8 drive checks in one turn with a Crystal Luster. And then I forgot to cover Crystal Luster's GB3 in the MLB. Crystal Luster's GB3 is if you have 3 or more units with grade 2 or greater, when your opponent would call from their hand, they have to call with 3 or more, so they get a triple door effect, which is very, very strong. So yeah, no one's surviving really a GB3 Crystal Luster, especially in tandem with Ashley, which is arguably the best grade 3 in Royal Paladin right now, period. At the end of battle, it attacks, you can Soul Blast 2, and you get to call a grade 2 or less card with Jewel Knight in this card name to rear guard circle, which you can call the Christine, reveal another grade 3 from your hand, and then call another Ashley. So you can keep chaining a bunch of cards together. Overall, Sibyl's effect lets you put cards into Soul and draw the card so you can fulfill the Salome cost. The reason this Ashley reverse is in here is because this helps you in your Link Joker matchup. The Link Joker is one of the good decks against Jewel Knights because you can't call over the units because they're locked, so those zones really don't exist. So overall, just like very, very strong. And actually, the new Premium Collection 2022 stride helps this deck if you go against Megacolony. When this unit attacks, you counterblast 1, choose a card face up from your G zone, draw the same number of cards as you have rear guards. You choose the same number of those cards from your hand as the number of cards drawn, and you call them a rear guard circle. Then, if you have 5 or more rear guards, you get an imaginary gift force. So overall, just plenty of good options. This deck has done so much work, and Eric Zaritas like taught me all the combo lines. This deck's phenomenal. I love playing with and playing against this deck, so I think that this, if you really want to play the best deck in Royal Paladin, I think hands down it's Jewel Knights. And again, you can find this deck log in the Google Doc below. So now that we've talked about the Shining Light, let's talk about some of our favorite edgy boys in Keter. So up next we have Shadow Paladin. Now this deck's kind of like kill your rear guards, get some value, all that cool stuff. So if you like any decks that, like, you know, in other card games where you had to like kill stuff and you got a lot of pluses, this may be for you. So we're gonna start off with the Revengers deck, and this deck revolves around Revenger, Raging Form Dragon. This is Crow's like tried and true staple. Like, this is his exact deck log that he's been playing, and overall I really enjoy playing this deck when I play Shadows. I also really love the next deck that I'm going to talk about. But what Raging Form does is when it's placed on Vanguard Circle, you can counterblast, and your damage zone has 4 or more cards. You can counterblast 1, search your deck for up to 1 grade 2 or less card with Revenger in its card name. So yes, a lot of this deck is name locked, but you get to call it to rear guard and then shuffle your deck. And then at the end of the battle, it attacks. You can retire 3 rear guards with Revenger in its card name. Choose up to 1 grade 3 card with Revenger in its card name from your hand and write it as stand. So if you have another Raging Form and you're able to use that counterblast effect to get back up to 3 rear guards, you can activate it again. And essentially what you try to do is you just try to combo off with Raging Form by getting a bunch of Raging Form Dragons to your hand and just having one big stride turn that just kills your opponent, because you're getting an additional force marker when you rewrite and all that stuff. So overall, this deck has a lot of potency, as well as it has access to Revenger Raging Fall Dragon Reverse, which helps you outlink Joker, so you're actually able to restand and get some good value that way. So like overall, there's a lot of good value found inside of Raging Form. So like 10 out of 10, perfect. You also have access to Revenger Slay Hex Dragon. This is a card that lets you choose a card from Revenger in your hand and discard it. And when it's placed on Vanguard or rides a unit in Revenger in its card name, you can search for a Raging Form, ride it, get the force marker, then this card comes back to your hand, so you can either use it as a stride fodder or another way to get like more Raging Forms. It's just a little more counterblast heavy, so you may have to be careful. The deck though is chock full of free value cards. So the way you extend without being at the limit break 4, as Vanguard players call it, or being at the 4 damage, is with Dark Bless. So if this is put in the drop zone by the cost of one of my units' ability, if I have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard, which I'll of course have it with Raging Form, I can call a grade 1 Revenger from my deck, which is powerful because then it guarantees gets me back to at least 3 if I have a full board, so I can activate a Raging Form 1 more time. Where the real good free value though comes from is mana. Mana is when it's called, you call a grade 1. Like, it is absolutely free. So this card is arguably the strongest grade 2 in the deck. It's an 8k, so it makes the numbers a little balanced, but now with History Collection, you have 16k columns, which is a magic number for a clapback against the History Collection stride. So that works out overall. Ribble is probably your best on hit, because when the attack hits it boosted, you look at the top 3 cards, you choose a card with Revenger in his card name, put it into your hand, you put the rest on the bottom of your deck, and then when he's retired by a card's ability, you can choose your opponent chooses one of their rear guards and retires it. Overall, very, very strong. And then you have more just guaranteed ways of searching Raging Form with Mar and Alfie. The good thing, though, for Revengers is that, like Royals, we have a Heart Copier. This is Dark Dragon, Chainmaker Dragon. Again, it's another flip, and it gains the abilities of your Heart card. So this will just copy Raging Form's effect, and boom, you got him. The cool thing, though, is that if you have 3 or more grade 1 or less units, you get the triple door for the Shadow Paladin. So a little bit different than Crystal Luster, but still you get that triple door effect, which is very strong. You also have access to other strides, which we will talk about a little bit in the next. profile. And so, but the one I wanted to kind of highlight here is Crawl. If you don't have, like, if you ran out of your raging forms and don't have a way to recycle them back, you can retire 2 rear guards, and your opponent chooses 3 or more of their rear guards and retires them. If they didn't retire 3 at the end of the turn, this unit gets once per turn at the end of the battle it attacks. CB1, you kill 2 rear guards, stand this unit, and it gets 10k. So it doesn't lose drive, and it gets a little bit of power. So Crawl is like pretty solid. It's a high committal though, so if you don't have like cards that get payoffs for being killed, maybe it's not the best way to do it. This deck though does play the blue OT because adding back heals and adding back other resource pieces that you kill off is very strong. And then it has access to Morfessa, which we'll cover in the next section for Shadow Paladin. So now we're on here to talking about Premium Luard. So Luard is one of those decks that have a bunch of different ways to deck build because you have the old G Dragheart version, you have the Dragfall version, then you have the V Plus version, which we'll be covering here. So there's just plenty of ways to build Luard, and this is one of the builds that I will be showing off here. So this one revolves around the V Dragheart Luard. So Luard is a deck that loves its deck full of grade 1s because it gets payoffs for having a certain amount of grade 1s in the drop zone because of the ritual effect, which is again really awesome. So as you can see here, Dagda explains, or well, not this one, but old Dagda used to explain. So Ritual 5 happens when there are 5 or more grade 1s in your drop zone. So this is very good. But talking again back on the Dragheart, so it's his V effect is retire 2 grade 1 rear guards, you draw a card, then choose one of your opponent's rear guards and retires it. And then its cost is reduced by a counterblast for each grade 1 card in your drop. So this card can be absolutely free, but you choose 2 normal units from your drop, return them to your deck, and then search your deck for up to 1 Drag Driver Luard, write it as stand, so you get another force marker, and then you'll re-ride back into a Dragheart Luard as rest at the end of your turn. So you get 3 force markers on a ride-up turn, which is really strong. You have access to Ildana, which Ildana is absolutely broken. In deck and drop, it gets grade -1, so it automatically counts toward your ritual count. But it also says discard this card from your hand. You reveal the top 10 cards of your deck if your Vanguard is grade 1, and you reveal up to 2 or more grade 1 cards. You choose a grade 2 card from among those 10, and you add it to your hand. Very strong because you have access to really strong grade 2s actually in this deck. Which it comes to Leafall. Leafall is your main ride target because it gets a Karen from deck, and then it makes like the Karen thing, so like you have like the pseudo Leafall rush in this list. But your best grade 2 in the deck for when you go into your Morfessa turns, which we'll talk about once we get to the strides, is Dagda. Dagda is your main attack extender in the deck and like your most important rear guard to have on the board. Hanali now is important, so we're going to talk about Hanali a little bit. Hanali, let's essentially can prevent like high multi-attack decks that need a lot of counterblast to kind of like kill you, because you can like limit them in a certain counterblast, which then they can't like, you can make it sometimes like where they can't like make it like past 5 attacks because they can't pay the counterblast to attack you anymore. So it's pretty strong. And then the remove unit only affects the opponent. So overall, very, very good card. And the fact that it's a searchable grade 1 from a lot of these cards is very powerful. Ezra's is arguably the best perfect guard in this game because it's ritual 3s. You choose one of your rear guards, retire, and choose another Ezra's, and you put it on the bottom of your deck, and you return this Ezra's to your hand. So you almost always have a supply of a perfect guard every turn with Ezra's. Very, very strong card. Nemain can search you this Nemain to put a grade 3 from your hand into Soul, so you get Drag Driver Luard's effect to get an additional crit of all your grade 1 rear guards. You get base crit 2. So then you can threaten way lethal, like really early, so that way your Morfessa's turn is even more deadly. The trigger lineup though is pretty simple. Like you have access to Belial Owl, and the way you just get value back from that is just pretty easy. You have Vicro 2 as another starter because you play the V-Series starter. Is the ritual ability you get to, when it dies, you get to countercharge 1, so you can like refund a cost of Morfessa. Overall, very, very strong. The name of the game though is stands, and I'll cover these in a second. So the main thing you get out of playing Morfessa is it's counterblast when you turn a card from your G-Zone face up, and you retire 2 rear guards. You draw 2 cards until the end of the turn. Your trigger units in your drop zone are regarded as grade 1, which increases your ritual count because you want ritual 10. All of your front row rear guards get it plus 15,000 power and a critical, and when your opponent would guard from cards, they have to guard with 2 every time. So overall, very, very strong. But how do we get this pressure? So the main game plan for this is you want to get into a Morfessa, you want to find a Dagda, and you want to be at Ritual 10. Now, this is where the game plans can be a little different. You can either go Force 1 to have these units be really, really high, so they have to like commit a lot of cards because it's not just PG guard. Like they have to start like shelling out like a lot of cards that they will have to hard guard these. Or you can go Force 2, give your front row all plus like base 2 crit, because the Morfessa is a +1 critical, so those rear guards and all those units can become 3 crit because it includes herself. But Dagda, when it attacks a Vanguard, if you have a Vanguard with Luard in its card name, you can retire a grade 1 or less rear guard, search your deck for up to 2 grade 1 rear guards, call them to rear guard, and shuffle your deck. So you get to create essentially a new column. And how you keep getting value out of this is that if you have fine stands, and when you drive check them off Morfessa. So the stands are the name of the game. All of these go back to deck. These stands go back to deck. So as you're filtering your deck and making it very compressed, you're able to return all your stands back to deck off their effects. So overall, just like very, very strong. Like don't sleep on these at all. These cards are fantastic. Like Curse Eye Raven's great because you get to rest, get to call like a unit, and the rest on the bottom. And then, yeah, so you return this to deck, and you put a unit on board that you can just kill. So like if you find like a Vicro or something, overall it's just like very powerful. But yeah, there's just a bunch of different things. The Ace G guard in this deck is Deep Griever. You can make this like you can send 5 grade 1s from your drop back to the deck, which is really easy. He gets a bunch of shield, but if you put 5, you can CB1 have it become a perfect guard. So you can actually dodge like things that you can say like, oh yeah, no sentinels. Well, you can just G guard with this, send 5 back, counterblast 1, you have your PG without having it be a sentinel, which is very, very strong. So overall, Luard is very good. Both like Shadows is kind of in a weird spot where because we're in such like a prevalent like Narukami meta like right now in the day of Nades at this time of recording. But I mean, there's just so many options, and this deck obviously it has a lot of fan favorites behind it. So again, we're just rolling and going. So if any of these decks interest you, make sure you go check out the Google doc below. It has all these deck codes, and let's get moving now into Gold Paladin. So starting now with Gold Paladin, we're going to be talking about Ezel, this deck build. So Ezel does the mechanic of superior riding, which you guys should be introduced if you are primarily standard players, because it just got introduced out of set 11. But in Premium, you're actually able to stride if you've been on grade 3 for an entire turn, which you get access through superior riding. Not only that though, Ezel's able to abuse a stride that they got back in 2019. Using Spear X Dragon. So how you set up the superior ride in Ezel is you either use Knight of Bowmains to discard a card to get a Knight of Elegant Skills Gareth from your deck, and then you're able to activate the top skill of Blonde Ezel here. Let me get one that's a little more readable. If you have a Knight of Superior Skills Bowmain and a Knight of Elegant Skills Gareth on your Vanguard or Rear Guard, you can Soul Blast one of this Criff starter, which is this card right here, and you ride Ezel as stand. Additionally, you have another superior ride engine in terms of Flame Wonder Wind Lion Wonder Ezel, and you can retire a Howl off your Rear Guard circle, and then you get to ride a Ezel from your deck. Another strength of Gold Paladin 2 is that they have a card called Percival. This card is actually fantastic. When it's placed on your, if your Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, you can counterblast 1, discard a card from your hand, you get an imaginary gift, Excel, and you search your deck or drop zone to up to 1 Oath Liberator Aglavale, and you get to call it to your rear guard circle, so you can really just call it to the Excel circle you just made. And this is a hard once per turn. But this card is very powerful because like if you superior ride, you get an Excel. If you go into Raven-haired Ezel, you can get an Excel. If you go into Percival, then you get another Excel. You made like 3 Excel markers on your first turn, and you get to go do all that with like Spear X Dragon. But the power with Spear X Dragon is that if you have 2 damage when you go into the superior ride for Ezel, more than likely not, you've called like 2 cards like to rear guard circle during that turn. You can counterblast 2, discard a card, and then stride this from your Vanguard circle from face down in the G zone. And then you can Soul Blast 1, flip a card, and then you look at the top 5 cards of your deck, you can call 2 from among them to rearguard circle. So you can really just stride on your opponent when your opponent's on a grade 1, which that advantage is huge. And then you can call like these triggers that go to soul and draw cards. Just overall very powerful. And we play the Ultima in this list because Gold's kind of lacks a strong finisher, and by teching in a stand, you're able to just essentially have your board restand with the Ultima ability, giving trigger effects everywhere. So you're actually able to restand your entire board because you're going to apply that stand trigger to every unit on your board, which is absolutely crazy. And of course, you're just going to give them a crit, so like, why not? But overall, like, this deck's pretty solid. Doesn't see as much play because like I think Gurgit history is a little better, which we're about to cover. But definitely like has its merits. Like it has a good matchup against like Link Joker because you can do the Mithril Ezel and unlock cards. Just has like so much like different utility options. Is able to use Sleamy Flare because it doesn't have access to the Gurgit defensive skill, so it's able to call cards from decks. So you're able to like grab PGs, guard with the PG, all that good stuff. So just really free. Moving on into Gurgit. Gurgit here is like a very defensive deck. His whole skills are about you being attacked. So we're going to go to his G era version. His G era version is at the beginning of the guard step. He has been attacked. You can counterblast one, soul blast one. Look at the top 4 cards of your deck, and then you get to call one of those cards to the Guardian Circle. So it's really strong actually because you're able to just like find a PG off the top of the deck, call it, activate the PG effect, discard, the attack doesn't hit. Like it's very strong, and you automatically get the GB2 again from the history collection. That's one of the powers of these things as we continue on into the video, is that some cards just have really good during your opponent's turn GB2s, and that's what makes these history strides actually very impactful. And the history stride gives you 2 Excel markers. So if you find a Percival during also that high-end turn, you're actually able to make 3 Excel markers going first, which is crazy because your opponent's on a grade 2. So then you're just able to punish them more. And like overall, it's very strong. Because then you also gain access to the Scarface Lion, so then like you get the access to the defensive draw when those are checked. It's just so good. It's a lot of free value. You also have access to this promo, which is Canaris. If you call 2 or more units this turn, you can get plus 5k power, plus 5k shield, which can matter defensively. You need that 10k shield. But if it's put to rear guard or on Guardian Circle, you can discard a card from your hand. You look at the top 3, you call 1 grade 2 from rear guard. But if it was put on the Guardian, you can put it to the Guardian Circle instead. So it just keeps getting bigger. It's really good defensively. And again, it techs a stand trigger, so that way you are able to go for your Ultima finisher. Just again, there's just a lot of good free value cards inside this deck. So yeah, just Gurgit has a lot to offer defensively. Ezel's more for your offensive high roll. So if either of these decks interest you, if you like playing cards from deck, Gold Paladin is the way for you to go. Next, we're going to be covering Genesis. We're going to be covering Regalia, and we're going to be covering Astral Poets, as Fenrir is still kind of like in the works between like what's really ironed out to play. But Regalia essentially is a deck that revolves around having a bunch of Regalia units, and it all flows around this stride right here, Ultimate Regalia of Almighty Minerva. Minerva can soul blast 3 cards with Regalia in their card name. You choose a face down card with the same name, you flip it face up, and Minerva gets plus 10k and a drive. Why this is so powerful is because you can get Force 2 because you have access to cards such as Jaeger's Shield that gives all of your cards with a Divine Gauge boost. And a Divine Gauge is either a card from Soul or it gives it from some place under the Vanguard that gives it a Divine Gauge. And this can be given through the effects of Angelica, which when it attacks, you can choose 2 of your rear guards and give it from your soul as a Divine Gauge. And those Divine Gauge cards cannot be removed. So like this deck actually has a very strong matchup in the Narukami, but where the power comes from is Norn. Norn can discard a Divine Gauge to restand the unit in front of it, which includes the Vanguard. So as long as you have a Yggdrasil out, the Norn can boost and then can restand the 4-drive Yggdrasil and then make it go to drive -1. It's really powerful and should not be slept on. And the greater thing with this is that you don't need a history stride for this deck at all. You have access to Marduk and Genesis, which does this play of being able to counterblast 1 and soul blast 6 and stride this unit on your Vanguard Circle as rests from your G-Zone face down, and it gets the power and the critical of one of your heart cards, and it gets that from all the trigger effects this turn. But when your Vanguard attacks, you can activate that cost and then just straight up stride this card. It does not check if your opponent's at grade 3. It just says, are you on grade 3 and are you attacking your Vanguard? Okay, cool. Counterblast 1, soul blast 6, stride me. It's very powerful because then that way you're going to straight up just boost with the Norn, and then restand it and then go to Twin Drive. But overall, just again, a lot of good value here. Thread is going to get you to draw cards and move gauges around to continue to protect really important rear guards. Lodrissa gives you more advantage of being able to choose 2 card names from your drop, put them to soul, and then also being able to kind of less one and pick Regalias off the top. And then Yodun can add herself back if you soul blasted her out of a cost for Regalia. If you do, you're able to bind another one from your drop and like return it to hand. So overall, very strong. Nothing too crazy here, though, as you're just always going to be going Minerva or Marduk. I've never gone into really any other strides, but now let's talk about a very funny deck that you have access to inside of Genesis. That being Astral Poets. So you get this Astral Plane in Vanguard when you have either 3 or more force markers on your Vanguard circle. And you get this because then you're able to Soul Blast with the sum of Grace being 5 to open the Astral Plane, or you automatically get the Astral Plane when you have 5 or more gift markers on your Vanguard circle. Because then you get Valkyrion. Valkyrion can only be called to that open Astral Plane, and it ignores the conditional, like, regular normal calling. Valkyrion then, when it's placed, checks the top 5 cards of your deck. You choose a card from there and you put it to the drop zone. And Valkyrion gets drive checks equal to that card's grade. Well, I don't know if you've noticed, but we're playing Grigophilia in this deck. Where if you hit the Grigophilia, you can literally get 10 drive checks with Valkyrion, restand it with Uranus, and then rest 2 Astral Poets off this Uranus ability to stand the Valkyrion, and it gets drive -5, so it has 5 more drive checks. This in turn then can let you, if you hit one of the stands with Dreaming Dragon, literally swing again, or you can, if you hit the over trigger, you give it the effect to just swing again. So you can get so many drive checks and just absolutely blow your opponent out on a high roll, because you can just get stupid amount of drive checks with Valkyrion. And you can get these force marker conditions really easily because you have Astroness of the Fervent Will, which is counterblast. You reveal an Astral Poet from your hand, and then you're able to get an Imaginary Gift Force and put it on your Vanguard circle. This Uranus is Soul Blast 2, get a force marker, and then this Uranus, of course, you ride, you get a force marker, and this also gets grade +2 in the soul, so it's actually a grade 4. So this chains into this grade 2, so you actually have full access to like your whole combo if you hit that ride line. The other thing too is that you also can pinpoint search for Valkyrions with Ioannis Dragon and get an Imaginary Gift Force on your Vanguard circle. Yeah, this deck's kind of crazy. You can stride into Marduk too to get more drive checks if you have that enough soul, like after you swung with that Valkyrion, because it doesn't need for this to be like continuous. You just open the Astral Plane until the end of turn, versus like you being on this Uranus that you would lose that continuous ability and then accidentally close the Astral Plane because you don't have that effect anymore. But yeah, this deck is just surprise, like out of nowhere, gotcha, I sack you with crits, like haha gotcha funny deck. So that's where Astral Poet stands right now. But it's a very funny deck, and like you should watch out for it. Like in Premium, like it can just straight up just steal games for no reason for players that don't know how to play against it. So if you have access to an Astral Poets V Series deck and you have the Dragon Tree deck, you can just blend those together and brew a really spicy Premium deck and just only seriously like pick up Marduks. That's how free this deck is. So I mean, just go for it. I mean, you have no idea like what you're missing. Plus, you can return your entire stuff all the way back to your deck with the Dreaming Dragon. So it's pretty free, pretty fun, and definitely something you should look forward to for playing in Premium. Now we're going to move on into Angel Feather. This is one of the more interesting decks found inside Keter Sanctuary, but more in particularly, you're going to notice that we're not playing a V-Star. We are playing this card called Neon Gize. This card is very interesting because it changes how triggers actually work inside Cardfight Vanguard. This changes the power increase to bind a Zeroth Dragon from your G-Zone, and this is a whole entire game plan. So Gize revolves around you getting checking triggers, and the thing with Angel Feather is that you damage yourself and you heal, so you're actually to perform a lot of like pseudo damage checks, which increases your chances of hitting triggers, which fuels the Gize game plan. This is one of the best decks right now to do Gize with, and actually I think this deck is very strong currently right now in the meta. Here's the thing, there's just like, it's really RNG based. So if you hit triggers, you kind of win, but if you don't, you don't. But why is Gize such a phenomenal game plan? So as you see here in the G zone, there's 5 Zeroth dragons here. You have the one from Zoo, the one from Dragon Empire, all these ones down here. That little like egg looking guy transforms into this. And he says that when he strode on Vanguard Circle, when you have those 5 Zeros bound, you can discard a copy of your Vanguard and ultimate stride into him. And then you call those 5 Zeroth dragons from your bind zone onto the rearguard circle. Those Zeroth dragons cannot be affected or moved by any card effects, cannot be attacked. They just have almost entirely immunity. There's very few ways to play around it. But at the beginning of your turn, you deal 1 damage to your opponent for each of those Zeroth dragons you control. So at the start of your turn, after you ultimate stride this, the turn after, you deal your opponent 5 damage. Straight up. So you essentially leave your opponent at like 1 or 2 the entire game, and just deal them 5 at the start of the turn, and most of the time they die. Because you stay at pretty high damage. So that's kind of the win game plan for this particular build of Angel Feather. Let's talk about like what the actual Angel Feather cards do. So Angel Feather is a protect clan. Angel Feather wants to deal itself damage. Again, like I explained, it just wants to increase those chances of checking triggers as many times because that's how it gets its value. Gabriel, the V series, is actually one of the best ways to do that. It's literally Counterblast 1, Soul Blast 1, you return a card from your damage zone to your hand, put a card from your damage zone on the bottom of your deck, and then you deal this unit 2 damage. So for 1 Counterblast, 1 Soul Blast, you get to pick a card from your damage zone, add it to hand, you get to send 1 card so you can put the trigger if you checked 1 back onto the bottom, and then you deal it 2 damage. So you get 2 chances to hit a trigger. Bind for Gize. Hamiel does the same thing. It's when placed if you have a Vanguard with black and its card name, you counterblast 1 and deal a damage, and then you call a card. You call a card from your rear guard damage zone to rear guard, then you deal 1 damage to your Vanguard. So you pseudo heal while plussing. Yafkiel is another damage dealer, and so is Salafiel. She's actually, I think, the best because she's counter CB-less. Doing that for a soul is really good. Because you're replacing the power gain of triggers, you really want to get the best value out of your triggers, and doing this is with draws. Doing this with draw triggers is the best way to do this inside Gize. So you're always drawing a card every time you check a trigger pretty much. And the cool thing with this over trigger is that since Gize changes the power gain of triggers, you're able to actually, with the Cray Elemental Obaria over trigger, you are able to gain 100 million twice, which is 2 power increases. So this flips 2 Zeroth dragons and binds them off of the Neon Gize starter. There's also some other strides, like neat fancy stride tricks you can do inside Angel Gize. The big one is being able to get extra drive checks with Zafkiel. You're able to put cards into your damage zone, and then depending on their card type, you either get a for each trigger you get a drive, and for each normal unit your front row units get 10k. You're also able to heal using Raphael. You can choose a card from your damage zone and heal it. You just flip another Raphael at GB2. Very, very strong. You're also able to heal down for CB3. Choose a card from your G-Zone, flip it face up, discard 2 cards, and then you choose 2 cards from your damage zone and heal them. Overall, like, very, very high value, very, very strong. Yeah, and it's just essentially like you hit triggers for this deck, you win because you're just going to ultimate stride into Gize. You're actually able to ultimate stride into Gize off grade 2 because nothing here in the ultimate stride condition says that you have to be at grade 3. Very strong. It's just absolutely amazing, and it's really one of the truly different decks you have inside Vanguard. And again, plays Honolly to slow down your opponent, plays all these utility grade ones to set up your damage checks and stuff. So very fun deck. They also play the Reverence Rust Dragon to choose a grade 2 or greater card from your drop you put on the top of deck. So you choose your Heal Guardians, and then you're able to get a trigger check when you deal yourself off the top for 1. Very, very good. And then again, just revolves around the Gize game plan. But if you don't want to play Gize and Angel Feather, you can play No Seal. And No Seal is very, very interesting as well because it essentially does a lot of like self-damaging stuff. Like again, this Angel Feather's game plan. Because when it's played Soul Blast, when you search your 1 card from No Seal, you put it in your damage zone, shuffle your deck. If a card was put in your damage zone at the end of the turn, you can put a card from your damage zone on the bottom of your deck. Note that this effect though can kill you because for Angel Feather, you instantly deal yourself 1 and then heal 1 like for the effect. So you're not actually like doing that immediately. So you can put yourself to 6 with this card and lose. You can put yourself to 6 with other Angel Feather cards, but since you're healing off that effect, the check state action doesn't finish. So just be mindful of that. But the main thing with No Seal is that No Seal wants to get these Happy Bell No Seals into your damage zone. So all your front row units can get like 15k once you get all 3, and all those are face up. You also play the Ultima finisher in this deck because, again, Angel Feather is a clan that lacks a finisher. But you have the Refros just to get the stand, and like it puts itself back. I think this time they should unlimit this card so you can do the loops and stuff again with Ultima and do things like that. Just because like it's just very like one-dimensional. The G guard here is phenomenal too. It's also really good in Gize. It's kind of less one, you deal yourself a damage and heal 1, so you can like perform a trigger check. You can look at the top card of your deck too, and you can put it on the top or the bottom, so like you can increase your chances of just hitting triggers. Overall, like very phenomenal G guard. This too, it does a lot of like actual like damage zone manipulation, so you're actually able, like off the Kosiel and all the other cards, you're able to just actually just add cards to your hand. Put no seal name specific to the damage zone. Just overall, it's like a lot of high value top end. And they also have strides like Basiel, which can actually make you lose the game at 8 damage, so you get more of your toolbox zone a little bit bigger, and then your opponent takes it a little harder for your opponent to kill you, because then you can stay at 7, and then your opponent can never 6 damage heal. So there's a lot of really crazy, weird combo lines that you have access to. And then Gavial Prim is also free. She's a Soul Blast 1, and you just get a free ping off the Act for Rescue 1. Then when he attacks, you can choose the same number of cards from your damage zone as the number of face-up cards in your G zone. You can call them separate rear guards, and then you put the top card of your damage zone face down. That's the big thing. So just, again, a lot of free value. You have the Aidroid Lamedo just to do some Sentinel restriction. Just overall, though, a lot of good value. And Angel Feather is a very, very fun deck to play if you're just getting into premium. And No Seal is actually pretty budget. So, yeah. A lot of different ways to play this clan. Again, the deck logs are in that Google Doc down below. I'm going to keep referencing that throughout the video, but make sure you check it out. And let's get going into OTT. If you ever considered wanting to be able to legally look at your deck and stack it however you want, maybe OTT is the deck for you, because then you get to put all your triggers on the top of your deck and then just hit them and win games. So that's the game plan here with Oracle Think Tank. So let's talk about Susano to start. We play the G-Series Susano because we want to get access to the History Collection Stride into Kirin, and OTT is a Protect deck, so you just get Protect 1s and get PGs and be able to guard cool stuff. So yeah, let's go with that. And then Kirin's effect is when an attack hits the Vanguard, you look at the top 2 cards of your deck, choose a card from among them, put it in your hand, you put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. So again, it's more filtering and filtration. You have access to Amaterasu, which Amaterasu, when it's revealed by a card effect, you can buy the top card of your deck and then choose one of your Vanguards, and it gets plus 10k and a crit. So you can get your Vanguard really fat, and you kind of do that when you go into the Momo play, so that way you resend your Vanguard a bunch of times, and this has a bunch of power and crit on it, and then your opponent has to guard every single swing it does. So don't sleep on Momo at all. And you get this effect from Amaterasu through Magical Kaliko, which will reveal... So you choose a card from your hand, you discard it, you search up to 3 cards from your deck, reveal them, your opponent chooses 2 cards from among them, and you put the chosen cards in the drop zone and the rest into your hand. So you just reveal 3 Amaterasu and get all 3 Amaterasu effects. Pretty strong. Tetramagus can stack triggers back on the top of the deck. This is to find your Susanos and your other things. Popo is when your deck has 10 or less cards, she gets 10k and your opponent can only call grade 0s. So it says, hey, find 0 PGs. Overall, pretty strong. The Dragon King can actually activate the over trigger like additional effect and then just like keep it. So you don't get to activate the additional effect, but you can just be like, oh yeah, 100 million, and then have the 50k shield in hand. So that's something to be mindful of. Overall, pretty strong, and it's pretty interesting too overall. Is there anything really to highlight? Oh yeah, so we should also talk about like the main stride for OTT is Ichikishima. You get to Counter Blast 1, Soul Blast 1, you choose a face down, Persona Flip, of course, same name, you draw 2 cards. And then at GB3 Oracle, you choose a face down card from G zone, flip it face up. And during that turn, your opponent cannot call Guardians from G Guardians and grade 0 cards from Hand to Guardian Circle. So you can turn off draw PGs and turn off G Guardians. pretty good. Ichikishima is your like strongest finisher you have access to inside OTT, so please don't sleep on her. She's really, really good. In terms of that, you play just a bunch of other utility stuff just to be able to like activate trigger effects and stack your deck and all that good stuff. Like again, you see the Reverence Rush Dragon here again, and the Diori Run. So overall, good value inside the Keter cards for attack options. You have also kind of the same idea with Battle Sisters, except this deck is like a lot more name specific. I don't know why I'm reloading, but okay. But so there we go. And you play the over trigger, the Keter one, just because you're able to see more triggers and stuff. So overall, it's pretty impactful. Nothing too crazy. Again, you still have access to Ichi, still have access to Momo and the Dragon King. You also have Wakurahime, which can like stack the over trigger pretty much on the top of your deck. So pretty good there as a finisher. And you just can play another like ride line just to get to more of your Fukio Moon cards. Like again. Fromage again, like protect. It's just all this stuff's like pretty simple. Like it explains the self of like when it's placed, you draw a card. And if you have Vanguard Battle System name, you draw a card. So like draw Pot of Greed for on place, and then you have a solid ride up turn that gives you some solid advantage overall. And you have access to actually your Battle Sisters crit, which you can put back to deck. So putting these crits back to deck is obviously really powerful since you're drive checking into them. So you're able to recycle that pressure over and over again inside of Battle Spirits. Then lastly, we have Tsukiyomi. Tsukiyomi, none of the cards in Tsukiyomi like shuffle the deck, which is important because that way you, for Tsukiyomi, you create an entire reverse stack, and you just memorize how you order the cards. And then once you hit the reverse deck, you know the order of your entire deck from the top down. And you get into her, and she just lets you do that. You reveal 2 or more triggers during your drive check. It gets front 10k. You just do so much free value. That like it's so worth. And then of course you play like Ichi and other stuff, so like again it's just more strong value that you can't like miss out on just because of like how the reverse deck works, because then you use Silent Tama during the Battle of the Detective Vanguard. Your opponent cannot call normal units from your hand to guard, so they can't. So with Ichi, they can't call grade 0s, you can't call normal units, and then you can't call G Guardians. Heal Guardians only, like to call from hand straight up. Like that's the only way you can guard Silent Tom. So you can shove a bunch of crits with the Ichi play onto the Silent Tom and just go for game. OTT is pretty simple. You're just trying to stack your deck in a certain way. So if you played Magic, you're just scrying your entire deck, putting all the triggers on top, hope you hit them, get free resources and value and draw, and that is the name of the game. Alright, now moving on into Dragon Empire, we are starting off with a fan favorite. We're going to be talking about Dragonic Overlord for the Kagero clan. So again, this is another Force clan, but this deck likes to go into Force 2 because it restands its Vanguard multiple times, and so like that pressure of like just hitting triggers and having a high crit Vanguard kind of forces you to guard it a bunch of times. And so it utilizes the V-Series, the X, or the Cross, or however you want to pronounce it. There's plenty of different pronunciations for all these interpretations of Overlord. But as Soul Blast 1, you get to search your deck for an Overlord card, and you essentially get to copy its effects. And it gets the name and the abilities of it until the end of turn. And then the cards in your hand are regarded as 0 at all times. And then if your opponent's grade 3 or greater, its drive can never fall below 1. And it just gains a bunch of effects. So most of the time you're copying the end. So that way you can restand a bunch of times. You restand actually about three times. And then with the Rebirth, you are able to actually just have an even better Link Joker matchup. Because if you have 5, you can make multiple gift types. And if this is your main game plan, like in the Link Joker matchup, you can actually go Force 1 and get your Vanguard like really, really huge. And that's why you just play like the super high crit density, is because you're just able to extend over the top. And then of course Drag Veda like lets you activate more effects as well. It's just overall very strong. And they play the Conroe because they want to grade 1 search a lot, because they have like really good PGs like this that can actually like intercept and stuff, because you can move it to the Guardian circle when your Vanguard's attacked for a Soul Blast. Conroe gives you all the counter charge you're ever gonna need. Just overall, it does the same deck. This is like the premier helmet deck. You're just swinging your Vanguard like 2 to 3 times every turn, and that's it. You don't really have too many strides you go into inside Kagero, but I'll cover some here. Dungeon Valor is probably your best one. It's when anytime someone guards with a PG or a G Guardian, he can auto restand himself. And then you can retire some rear guards and get 15k for each sentinel in his drop zone. So like he's where he can get the pressure. Like if you go force 2, then you're able to like have like 2 PGs in the drop, give him 30k. He's like most of the time a 58 2 crit Vanguard, which you have to respect because then you have to guard it really weird to force him not to restand. The other thing too is the ability for defensive plays, and Kagero's like premier G Guardian is this card called Denial Griffin. I know it's really hard to see right now, but essentially it's when it's put on the Guardian Circle. You can choose you can counterblast one, choose one of your opponent's attacking rear guards and retire it, which is very strong. They also have the new Absalom, which is counterblast one when it's placed on the Vanguard that your opponent's Vanguard attacked. Your Vanguard, you're able to get plus 10k for each of your opponent's open rears. So like Kagero also has like this high retire volume, and that's what it's supposed to do, but not like necessarily an Overlord. It's really focused on that Vanguard centric game plan. Moving on then though to another list, we have Dragonic Lawkeeper. Now this, my friends, is a very defensive deck. Utilizing the ability of Lawkeeper at the start of each battle phase, you counterblast one, soul blast one, and for every 3 of your and your opponent's rear guards, your opponent chooses one of their rear guards and binds it. At the end of the turn, your opponent calls those cards that were bound by ability to rear guard, and those odd abilities do not activate. What this means is that if you have a board full of cards, and your opponent has a board full of cards, they may or may not have to bind a lot of cards from their board, which makes them play very weirdly. I actually played against this, against Order Colony back in that Springfest era, and I lost just because I was not prepared for this matchup. This matchup makes you play very, very weirdly. You have a lot of weird defensive options. Cards like this, when your opponent's rear guard is put into the drop zone, do the effect of one of your cards. You may pay the cost. You can choose up to 2 cards of your damage zone, turn them face up. Like, it just gives you free resources just kind of out of nowhere. It just overall, again, really good. Also have the ability for like a best harvest. And you can just activate that when you go into the Zanburst Dragon, which is literally just flip a card, retire all of your opponent's rear guards, and all your grade 3 you just get plus 10k. You can also go into Baccarat, which is the new stride for Kagero. Is when your unit attacks, you can turn a card face up from your G zone. If your opponent has 3 or more open rear guard circles, Fam gets 10k plus 1 crit plus 1 drive until the end of battle, and your opponent has 5 or more open rear guards. All of your rear guards get plus 10k until the end of turn. So your opponent shouldn't be playing into that last effect, hopefully, but yeah. Again, it's very defensive. They also play the Bellog, which acts as another Denial Griffin for inside the deck. So when it's placed on guard, you can choose one of your Vanguards, and it gets, at the end of the battle that this unit was attacked, if the battle did not hit, you can choose one of your opponent's rested rear guards and retire it. So this can stop like decks that revolve around like one rear guard restanding, so like that's a way to counter like Blaster Blade if the Blaster Blade doesn't have resist off the Gantz a lot. So just a lot of like weird combo lines, and overall this deck just is very tanky and just relies on that strong defense provided out of Lawkeeper to be able to push through. I can't remember. This deck is kind of like a toss-up if you want to go like Force 1 or Force 2. I prefer Force 2 just because you have access to Dungeon Valor, and I still think that's the best like stride you could go into in Kagero. Giving that like 2 crit like base is pretty powerful, and I wouldn't sleep on that for any reason. But that's just kind of my pick, my thought. Yeah, just so you know, let me know what you guys are thinking, because this list to me looked pretty fun, and shout out for Nick Harp for giving me this. But that's gonna do it for Kagero. Let's roll into everyone's favorite Thunder Dragons. So now we move on into Narukami, and this deck, while I have a personal vendetta against it, I can't scoff at what it's able to do inside Premium right now. So as you can see, you kind of have like conflicting engines with Vanquisher and Steve. However, these cards work really well together because you essentially have a very good ride-up turn with using Vanquisher and their History Collection stride, which is right here. It will give you 2 Excel markers, and that puts you really high because you're drawing those cards because you're always going Excel 2. And you're also making your opponent, like messing with your opponent's board a little bit and starting to set up that bind zone for some of your really more powerful G guards. And then Sweep just starts keeping and continuously retiring your opponent's front row every turn. And it can also make 2 Excel markers if your opponent set you to 4 damage. You can counterblast 1, Soul Blast 1, get Imaginary Gift Excel, and then revive a card with Eradicator in its card name, which you're either going to be reviving Cho-Oh for more multi-attack pressure or Zuiten for more soul and draw advantage. Which overall just makes this like very, very strong. This engine is super consistent because you have access to Nusku, which will grab you any Eradicator. So Nusku can grab you Spark Rays, Cho-Oh, Zuiten, or Sweep, or the best grade 1 arguably in this deck, which is Demolition Dragon, which is at the end of the battle, a detector boosted. If that attack hit, you get to draw a card. Does not say on Vanguard, can hit rear or can hit Vanguard. And then you can choose up to one of your opponent's cards from drop and bind it. If you bound a card, you have to shove this card from your rear guard to your soul. You can just leave it to say, hey, I draw a card. This card is very, very strong. You also get access to Esperidia, which is a CB-less multi-attacker in this deck, which is very strong. But why do we need these CB-less attackers, and why do we care about our opponent's front row being missing? If you've heard murmurings of Premium, you would say that this is the strongest stride in Narukami, and that could be far less than true. Because honestly, it's this. This plus Sweep Command is very, very strong. This is Exterminate Dragon. So when it's placed on the Vanguard circle, you can just Soul Blast 1 and draw a card for each one of your opponent's open front or rear guard circles. This includes Excel circles. So this is why you have to be careful in this matchup about spamming Excel markers, because your opponent's front rows can just get really, really fat for no reason whatsoever. So like if you Gurgit and you spam out the 5 and you had like Aglavales that bounce back to your hand and like return, you open up those rear guard circles, your opponent could well just pay a counterblast and get 50k and draw 5 cards off this one card. Counterblast 1, Soul Blast 1. Get a bunch of power, draw a bunch of cards. It's really good. It's really good and keeps a lot of Excel decks in check. This is why Exterminate is very powerful. This is why I think this card needs to be on the watch list as well. I would honestly let them have Stun versus back. They ban VSR and they hit Exterminate. I think that this deck is fine. Because the consistency is the only really frustrating thing about this deck. They also play a stand trigger because the DP is a really good deck against this. That you can actually countercharge, so you're not like actually damage starved the entire time. But going on to what makes this deck even more insane is the ability for its G guard. So they have a really good one in Counteract, which lets them just essentially have like a 35k shield if their opponent doesn't bind anything for no cost. Their very strong G guard is Impede, which if you like double or triple impede somebody, you can blow up their board, because essentially Impede always checks for if you have rear guard, your opponent chooses one, retires and binds it, and then if they have 2 or more rear guards than you, they have to retire another one. They continually check this per activation, so there's just sometimes where an opponent can just double impede you, and if you're not on like an Excel deck, you can just straight up lose, because they'll just blow up your board, turn around, blow up your board with Sweep, and then they just get too far ahead in advantage with back-to-back turns, and it's very valuable. Oh, the best G guard though, in my opinion, for Narukami is that his Bulwark. It's Thunderstrike 3, so if your opponent has 3 or more cards in their bind zone, he gets plus a free 10k shield, and then when he's placed on Guardian Circle, for every 4 cards in your opponent's bind zone, you get to choose one of their rested rear guards in your opponent's front row and retire it. So again, it can get rid of those pesky restanding rear guards that don't have resist, and other ways to prevent them from being retired, and it's just overall very, very strong. They also have a very interesting finisher inside the GV8, which is when it's placed on Vanguard, you retire all rear guards of all fighters, bind all cards in your opponent's drop zone face up, and until the end of turn, this unit gets all of your units get plus 2k in each and all fighters' bind zones. So free power, free everything. It's just so good. It's just so value. Then you can just like call a board. That board is really big if the game's gone on for a super long time, and so it's just really, really good value. I would be able to talk about like some other decks in Narukami, but since they banned Full Bronto, I don't see Vanquisher as viable, and I don't think Dungaree is as good as it could be. But there are plenty of lists on YouTube if you would like to go check those out. I just really want to give those content creators that are looking into those decks and digging into those decks, the ability to get some viewership for those. But those are definitely different archetypes that you can play. But this right now is like the premier version of Narukami and what you should be playing if you want to go to like high level events and stuff. Like if you really want to learn this deck and what this clan is capable of. The Dragonic Vanquisher sweep deck is very, very strong, and I'd highly consider taking it to a BCS if it's not hit. Like this deck is crazy. But that's going to do it for our one Narukami list. Please, though, if you're interested, go and do your research. You can find so many more lists for this clan, but this deck log will be in the description below. Let's roll to Nubatama. So if you ever wanted a Shadow Clone Jutsu in a clan, here's one of them. So this is Nubatama. This is a deck all about I'd classify it as a control deck. You're trying to keep your opponent off cards. You're trying to force them to not be able to guard with certain cards. Like overall, this is like a really solid control feel inside of Vanguard. But it's a very interesting one because you get to do the funny thing of, hey, I like your cards, let me play with them. Because they have this keyword called Dominate, which you get from Shiranui Ouroboros. Dominate is when this unit strides, you choose up to one of your opponent's rear guards, stand it, and dominate until the end of the turn. It gets plus 4,000 power and can attack your opponent's other unit. Meaning that you can just take one of their rear guards, stand it, and swing it at their Vanguard. And then also activate any on-swing effects that are maybe applicable to you. Because you gain control of that entire unit. You'll see the Dominate keyword come up a lot through here, but we just want to clarify that Shiranui is a Protect clan. You're always going to be going Protect 1. You want that defense. You want like those good cards to play. It's just overall very good. And because we're playing the old Ouroboros, we get access to the good old Getsurugan. Even though you get 2 Protects, his on hit isn't anything too fantastic. It's just your opponent like chooses a card and discards it. But it keeps him off a card. It's still very important. You get to play actually a lot of really cool stuff like inside this deck. You have access to some very phenomenal grade 3 searchers with Tolabachi. Tolabachi can literally just like check top 7, find a Shiranui, add it to hand. Same thing with Unin. You reveal a grade 3 normal unit from your hand, you search up your deck for any grade 3 card, so this can actually grab you your Heal Guardians if you need extra defense. Nubatama has a plethora of great grade 1 searchers. The reason I like Unin a lot is because you're actually able to bounce, put this unit into your soul, choose 2 of your rear guards and return them to your hand. So you're actually able to bounce a lot of stuff and get a lot of like value back, which is great for when you have like an on-place countercharger like Sakura Fubuki, and that card's just great. Your grade 2 ride fixer. Has the ability of when it's boosted, Soul Blast 1, your opponent chooses a card from their hand and discard it. So you see a lot of discard themes, but the premier card in the main deck for Nubatama is this card Mizukaze, because this card is going to be almost in every list we bring up. When placed, you Soul Blast a grade 3 from your soul, and at the end of until the end of turn, your opponent cannot call grades that he or she has called from hand to Guardian Circle. That's called, period, and we're going to get into why that's really broken in a second. How you set up that grade 3 soul is when it attacks a Vanguard, this Stealth Dragon Shiranui regular. When it attacks a Vanguard, if you have a Shiranui in its card name, it gets 10k, and until the end of turn, end of that battle, you put it in a soul, draw a card, choose one of your opponent's rear guards, return it to their hand. If you return a card, your opponent chooses a card from their hand and discards it. So again, more discard power, but you're shoving that grade 3 to soul, which automatically gets the Mizukaze online. Now the big deal is Shiranui Rine. Rine is Counterblast 1. You choose a card with the same card name as Rine from your G-Zone. You flip it face up. Your opponent chooses 2 cards from their hand and calls them to separate rear guards, and they get plus 5k until the end of turn. You dominate them, and then your opponent's, and then attack your opponent's Vanguard 1 at a time. Your opponent cannot activate the auto abilities of the cards called off of those effects. And this GB3 is all dominating units gets plus 10k and a crit. So now here's the crazy play that you can do. When going first, you can set up GB3 really easy. You just go into Ouroboros. Ouroboros, you discard a grade 3. Go into Getsurugan. Getsurugan gets you the 2 protect markers. Going to flip himself up. You're going to be at GB2. And then you're going to be able to activate the following next turn at the beginning of your ride phase, even if your opponent leaves no board. You have to choose a card from your drop zone and call it. And calls that card... you choose up to 1 card from your opponent's drop zone, so like they can't like choose it and then call it to give it the 4k and underswing. because then when you stride Rene, it gets even more powerful. So like it's just very strong. It's just so good. So like they get a swing, then you go into Rene, then you can activate actually Misukaze. You can Soul Blast grade 3, and it's very strong. So they call, like, let's say off the Rene effect, they call a grade 1 and a grade 0. They can't guard with a grade 1 or grade 0 for the rest of the turn. So they have to be very careful about what cards they call off of the Rene effect if you've already activated the Misukaze, which you should do like when you go before you activate the act skill of Rene. But this card's very powerful. Another interesting stride they have is the ability for Mugen Lord Dagoku. You counterblast one, you flip a card face up in your G zone. Your opponent chooses 2 face up G units with power from their G zone, and you call them to rearguard. Your opponent cannot use their auto abilities. You dominate them and attack your opponent's Vanguard one at a time. During those battles, those auto abilities can be activated as if they were on Vanguard circle. So, like, you know, Ghidorah can Soul Blast one and call a grade 3 from deck. Kind of crazy when you can multi-attack like that. That's all I'm saying. So Dagoku comes up sometimes. Sukamura-kan, you can essentially set your opponent's hand to 4 and then like force them to live a turn. There's just a lot of really cool attack patterns you can get inside Nubatama. But this is my favorite way to play Nubatama, but there's a few other ways. Let's get into our next list, which is Magetsu. Magetsu is a very defensive deck. This is a deck that's also going to go Protect 1 because you also get a Sentinel ability from the main man Magetsu. When you have the ability, when your rearguards return to your hand during your turn, you can Soul Blast a grade 3 draw card, choose 3 cards from your hand, call them into rearguard. They get plus 5k until the end of turn off the Vanguard circle. But when he's attacked by your opponent's Vanguard, you can counterblast 1 and retire 2 rearguards, and this unit cannot be hit until the end of that battle. So pretty good when you're able to just like spam tokens. So you get these cards called Evil Decoy tokens. They're 0 cost, well, they're grade 0 with 5k intercept and can intercept from the back row. Which sometimes you may like want to go Protect 2, but since you're using these tokens as fodder for Magetsu, you should really never be doing that. But you also have the ability in Magetsu to reverse to gain drive checks. So what you'll do is you'll get 2 evil decoys with Yameshibuki. You'll use good old Jakumeso here to retire 2 grade 0 rearguards, which is obviously fulfilled by the evil decoy tokens being called. You get to return all of your rearguards to their hand. Then you get to call 2 cards to rearguard, and they get plus 10k, and then he gets plus 10k and a crit until the end of turn. It's just very, very powerful, very, very strong. Yeah, you just can't go wrong with it. It's just really good free value. Again, you play Rene because Rene is one of your best strides. But again, there's a lot of good defensive work here. The premier thing though, how you cheat like that grade 3 into Soul Effect, is that you can get the Stealth Beef Jakundo, which gets grade plus 2 in Soul if you have a Vanguard with Magatsu in his card name. And at the end of the battle with boosted, you can choose any number of your rearguards or return them in your hand. So you get that multi-attack like on your right up turn. Not as strong, of course, like with the history collection stuff, but again, you can't doubt on it at all. You definitely play a Dragon Empire OT. This list was from my good friend Kalen Lewis, who participated in a no OT tournament with this deck. But again, you want to play Dragon Empire OT. All Dragon Empire decks are going to play Dragon Empire OT. Restanding your Vanguard's crazy. But the Forktail can actually get you into the this faster. So overall, really good defensive. You still have your Mizukaze Rene lock, so just Nubatama has that like really good fail-safe every time. The last card I want to talk about for the deck list is Daihausen. Daihausen has a really cool effect of when an opponent's normal unit is placed on rearguard during their turn. If your opponent has 4 or more cards, your opponent chooses 1 card from their hand and discards it. So you essentially give your opponent like at 4 cards in hand, and then they get a triple drive, so they always go up to 7. So you start like dwindling their hand. So like, what if they're at 7 cards in hand? And then you rename them, and then they go to 5. Again, the same type of combos we've played, except Daihausen has a whole ride chain. So the grade 1 can search for a grade 2 or greater with Hausen in his card name, and then this one gets effects when rolled upon by a grade 3 if you have 3 or more cards. So you essentially still do the same discard shenanigans. You also can play her. She gets a little more like control effects. You still play your counter charger, all that good stuff. You also can play the cards that go to soul to countercharge just because you're a little more CB heavy in this deck. You also have access to Zonky, which Zonky, you can choose a card and just force them to call it, and then you can like have them discard. Like there's just so many like crazy things you can do with this deck. But again, Rine plus Mizukaze, you're failsafe every time inside this clan. You can't get any better than that. But that is gonna wrap it up. Now we're gonna take a look at Tachikaze, the big dino clan itself. We're gonna take a look starting with the Gaia deck. So this deck actually is more of your like control deck. You want to be drawing a bunch of cards with this deck. You want to be very like resourceful mounting because you're trying to prolong the game to where you have barely any cards left in deck, and you have this stand trigger that if you have 3 copies of it, you can perform an infinite loop. And I'm going to explain kind of how you do this with Coel Magnum. You put this card on the bottom of your deck. When this unit is put into the drop zone from rearguard circle during each turn, you may pay the cost. If you do, you draw a card, choose up to one of your other units, and it gets 5k until the end of the turn, and then you shuffle your deck. So let's say you call a Coel Magnum with 1 card left in deck over another Coel Magnum. That Coel Magnum is going to go to the bottom of the deck. You're going to draw that card. You're going to shuffle the deck. Then you're going to call that Coel Magnum, another Coel Magnum over that under that Coel Magnum. And then you're going to draw a card, shuffle your deck, get another, you get 5,000 power. So what you can do with this loop is that you can give your board infinite power with Coel Magnum loop. And that's just something that's very, very strong. The benefit though to this deck is the ability to have actually Gaia's on stride, which I think this is actually one of the most powerful on stride effects that we have access to in Premium. This is when a unit strides on top of this. You can counterboss 1, choose up to 2 cards from your hand, you call them to rearguard circle, and then you choose to 2 of your rearguards, and you get when this unit was retired from rearguard during this turn, you may call this card to rearguard circle until the end of turn. So this helps you live through this engorge mechanic, and you also play other cards in this deck that eat other rearguards to gain effects, such as Mega Rex, which is going to be retired another rearguard when it attacks a Vanguard. You can draw a card, but you can get to res that rearguard right back. And you have these utility value rearguards, such as Raven Patora, which lets you countercharge 1. You can call it back. This lets you get Freezer Nicks. You can countercharge 1, soul charge 1 if you have a Gaia Vanguard. The best one though is Little Tyranno. This is counterboss 1. Put this card into your soul when it's retired with the ability of the Gorge ability. You get to look at the top 4 cards of your deck, choose up to 2 cards with different card names from this card ability among them. You call them to rearguard circle. You put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. So again, it's just more aggro, more calling units, more flooding the board. And again, too, you get to kill more rearguards off with the Terrathurizo. This deck is just chock full of good value. It looks really weird because of these ratios, but it actually kind of works. For the strides, the reason we play the old guy is to get those additional Excel markers off our history collection stride, and it gets the when this attack hits a Vanguard, you choose one of your opponent's rear guards and retire it. So you can give some pressure actually to the Arc Raider. Off of Arc Raider, you just get to give that to a rear guard, and so you get to eat a rear guard, get some ability off of it. Just a lot of good value overall, because then you're able to eat Little Tyranno and other things. And then again, we play the Honolly because we want to prolong the game. In terms of G Guardians though, like Bullish Primer is huge. This is going to get plus 5k for each of our own open circles. So if we're getting a bunch of Excels, ta-da, we got value. So this is very, very powerful. The kind of the premier stride for us is Gluttony Nemeros. This is Engorged. So you can eat 1 rearguard, have it become engorged, and then when it becomes engorged, you can choose up to 5 of your equip gauges, which is where you take the top card of your deck and you put it under a rearguard. This is like the main V mechanic that Tachikaze got. So you can either eat 5 equip gauges and or rearguards, which then you can get those rearguards retired abilities, which is even like crazier. And if you ate 5 or more, you get to restand him, and he doesn't lose drive checks. So overall, just like really powerful. Nemeros is a crazy card. Arguably, I think the best stride that Tachi has access to. You also have access to Giganto Pharaoh, which can make all of your rear guards like self-restand themselves if you have enough soul, which is why it's really important that we play the Paralauncher. So that way we can get the soul, because we'll have the guy Vanguard name, get to draw a card, all that good stuff. So you're able to compress your deck down super fast, and you're able to actually draw a bunch of cards if you play this correctly, because you're just able to eat so many between Terror and you're able to eat so many with like Mega Rex. Like there's just no reason why you shouldn't be drawing like so many cards a turn and just getting such like high value. Plus you play like 7 defensive draws. So you have more than plenty of opportunity to hit really good draw lines inside your deck. For a more traditional Tachikaze list though, this is kind of like the Anger Blader like aggro deck. Or not Anger Blader, my apologies. This is Spino Driver. I'm thinking way old, but Spino Driver. When it attacks a Vanguard or is rode upon, you can counterblast 1, retire 2 rear guards. You get an imaginary gift Excel, draw a card, choose a card from your hand, call it to rear guard. Choose 2 of those units, and they get 5k until the end of the turn. So this is really cool because of a big thing. So you'll ride an Oxel generator, and you'll get another Oxel marker, so you get 3 Oxels. What happens if we get into Spino Driver Reverse? It's when this unit is placed on Vanguard Circle, you draw a card, choose a card from your hand, call it to rear guard, put the top card of your deck face down as an equip gauge for that unit 1 time. If you have a Spino Driver in your soul, you perform it 3 times instead. So you get to essentially like draw a bunch of your deck and fill the board. And this lets you be like a lot more aggressive. This gives you actual lines like from the Ancient Dragons. If you choose another rear guard with Ancient Dragon in its name, retire it at the end of the battle. If you have a Vanguard with Spino in its name, you can stand this unit. So like this is an automatic like multi-attacker restander for you. You play the Savage Mercenary because this is a 27k beat stick, and as long as it has an equip gauge under it, it can attack. It's really, really good. Regiodon is more free value, so when you eat these rears and it has equip gauges under it, you can call cards from equip gauge under itself to rearguard circle. Just again, a lot of free value. Plays the shooter for the high value and stuff. Like there's just like no reason why you shouldn't be playing it like this. Again, too, you really lean into Neberos. Neberos is your main value engine inside Tachikaze. It's just very, very strong, just being able to restand. Again, Giganto Pharaoh for the multi-attacks. You also play Gaia Devastate, which Gaia Devastate is actually kind of like your out-to-link Joker, funny enough. When it becomes Engorged, you get to counterblast 1, and you flip a card with the same card name, face up in the G-Zone. You get to draw a card, choose up to any two circles other than Vanguard for each face-up card in your G-Zone. So if you have like locked 5, and you have 3 face-up in your G-Zone, you can choose all 5 of your circles, retire, get rid of those cards, and put them into the drop zone. And then if those cards are 3 or more, he gets +1. He gets plus 10k, plus a drive, and plus a crit. So he can threaten very hard on his own. So it's just very, very powerful. Good out to link Joker to actually gain some value. And you still get your retire effects if you just put him into the drop zone. So overall, 10 out of 10. This deck's very fun, very exciting. Shout out to Logan for providing me these lists. But I know him, Zach, and Card Dweeb are like cooking, trying to figure out how to make Tachi the best right now. And so like these are some really fun ways and innovative ways. And Tachi is actually a really cheap clan to get into, and it's super fun and enjoyable. So if you like little combo patterns and stuff, like this deck can be considered an aggro / combo deck because there's a bunch of different combo lines like you can do to extend into certain things because you want to either get like the infinite loop and stuff like that. So just again, a whole bunch of fun, and I hope you guys enjoy Tachikaze. Again, the deck logs are in the Google Doc down below. But now let's roll on in to Murakumo. And now we wrap up with the last of the ninja clans inside Dragon Empire and the final clan for Dragon Empire for Premium 101, getting to know your clan. We're going to talk about Murakumo, and this is the true Shadow Clone Jutsu because you're going to be name copying and doing a bunch of stuff inside this deck. So we're going to go over Yasuye. Murakumo is an Excel clan, like Tachikaze and Narukami, and its on stride is actually pretty good for its stride up turn. So yeah, let's kind of talk about what Yasuye does. So when you stride on top of it, you can counterblast 1, you choose one of your rear guards, and you search up to 2 cards with the same card name as that unit and call it to rear guard circle. So you are able to get a bunch of free value. And then you get to ride a stride up into the Utsumi train, which lets you then get 2 Excel gifts. So you get a bunch of more zones for those cards to be called on top of. And then when the attack effect hits, is choose one of your rear guards, search up to your deck with 2 cards with the same card name as that unit, call it to rear guard, and then you get to put them on the bottom of your deck at the end of the turn. So it's a lot of cloning and a lot of like calling out a bunch of stuff. You have a great attack extender in Idioki Girl, which he can call another same card name. So you are literally just blinking your cards over and over again. One of the best cards though to copy actually is One-Eyed Nuedo. And these checks for if he has the same card name on the board. He gets boost, and then At the end of each turn, if you have 5 or more units, you can shove this card to your soul and draw a card. So, because you make so many Excel markers, you can actually have 5 other units on the board in the front, have these 3 in the back with boost, and then just shove these to 3, draw 3 cards. It's absolutely possible to be inside this deck. But after you hit Yasuye, you want to be either riding into Yasuye Tenma or the regular Yasuye. And this is going to give you access to the Homura Raider combo, which essentially lets you get a bunch of attacks after you go into your first kind of stride up turn, and you can restand this Homura Raider multiple times because you can counterblast 2, you flip another Homura Raider face up in your G zone. If the number of cards in your G zone is 2 or more, you get to at the end of the battle attack the Vanguard. You choose one of your rear guards, and you choose 3 of your rear guards that have the same card name. You bot deck them, and you get to restand him. And since you always forever have continuing additional cloning cards, such as Spellhound, you can Soul Blast 2 and search your deck for up to another Spellhound and call it. You're going to be able to continually like recycle these effects, which is really strong. Also using Oboro Keeper to be able to search for more grade 3 cards and keep on extending over your top end. And then you have other fun strides like Itsuzume, which kind of is more applicable in the next deck we can talk about right now. So we're going to cover now Shirayuki, and Shirayuki's whole thing is about power negging, and you still do have the Yasuye in here for the stride up turn, just because getting 2 Excel markers is still very powerful. We do like this lean engine inside this deck is what we would kind of call it, but you kind of revolve around Shirayuki's whole ability to neg power. So it's when play Soul Blast 2, choose one of your opponent's front row units, it gets minus 30,000 power until the end of that battle if it's placed on Guardian Circle. But the cool thing is that when your unit's attack does not hit, if you have a Vanguard with Shirayuki in its card name, you can counterblast 1, choose one of your opponent's front row units, and it gets minus plus 10,000 until the end of turn. If it's on Vanguard, you can call a card with Shirayuki from its card name from your drop zone to an open rearguard circle. So you don't get the last effect, but you do get that mid effect to neg 10k your opponent's Vanguard. So you can spit out a bunch of cards actually with the Inahume, which is probably your second like follow-up stride, which lets you then like stitch into more attacks and just use those CBs to make your opponents like harder to guard. So then eventually your attacks, just because you have so many, follow through. So you're cloning a lot of cards. You're getting dual weapon. When it doesn't hit, you get to retire it and choose a grade 1 or grade 3 card. You search your deck for up to 1 with the same card name. You call it to rear, and so you're able to start a little like pseudo loops like that. But the power with this deck comes really from the Fantasy Pedal Storm Shirayuki, where you're able to actually Soul Blast 2 and just like neg your opponent's front row 10k during your opponent's turn, which that 10k is permanent. So if they have like restanding rear guards and stuff, they're going to be kept with that negative 10k for the rest of the turn, unless your opponent starts hitting triggers and other things and putting that power back onto that unit. But still very powerful, and you're able to recur those fantasy pedals with Rainy Madam, and you'll be able to find them out of deck with just Jutsukuko Girl. So overall, this deck is fairly consistent and fairly powerful in terms of just being able to generate a lot of advantage with the Yasuye Lean engine. But if you like calling a bunch of cards, playing a bunch of cards from deck, this is kind of reminded me of the one where the place from Bind, it's the new Snake that just came out in set 11. That's very strong and can do a bunch of attacks, because you can also attack from the back row with some of these cards and some of the stuff. So just like, yeah, please don't sleep. Like, this card's fantastic. One other top end too that's an extender is actually the Shibaraku Victor. In the G zone, when your attack misses, you can Soul Blast one and call him to a Excel or like a rearguard circle. You want to call him to Excel just so he's a 20k, so he can probably hit a little better. But like overall, like again, him just like being able to miss just to continue like recall over is pretty powerful. So yeah, you just have a lot of top end extensions, and sometimes you just kind of overwhelm your opponent into a drought, and that's kind of like where Murakumo's strengths lie, and just in power negging and being able to get a lot of boards and just doing a lot of like small minor combos to keep on extending into more powerful plays. It's a lot of small pokes. But the power negging with Shirayuki definitely helps you avoid those defenses, while Yasuye's is all about like high power ceiling advantage, and you drawing a bunch of cards and then going into the kind of like Homura Raider combo following that to do like around like 12 to 16 attacks depending on your counterblast amount and your find ways to find counter charges like Onobayashi and other things, just so that way with your with your Yasuye Vanguard you're able to counter charge. So that's going to wrap it up for Dragon Empire. Let's see what other decks you have options for in Premium. Now we move into the Dark Zone, and we're of course talking about Spike Brothers, everyone's favorite football team in Cardfight Vanguard. So again, Spike Brothers is a Force clan, and the cool thing about Spike Brothers is there's actually really no preference because Rising Nova's ability gives you both Force types, which is very strong and very powerful when you're doing a bunch of chaining and attacks, and it's overall very, very cool. So Spikes, like every good traditional Vanguard deck, is an aggro deck, but you have a lot of really cool combo lines inside Spikes. The big one is that you see Greedon in this deck list, you see Juggernaut Maximum in this deck list, and you see Skydiver and other cards in this deck list. So Rising Nova's big ability in itself is Soul Blast when you get to choose up to 2 of your grade 3 rear guards and copy their abilities. And your right up turn versus you going into History Collection actually allows you to like be a pseudo Overlord and get the Force 2 and the Force 1 under your Vanguard. Then you get to swing your Vanguard multiple times between using Juggernaut Maximum skill and Greedon skill if you're able to call them out, which you have really easy access to between Rorna and other cards in the list. So you have that option to just high roll your opponent that way with the Rornas and the other cards like in this deck list. Spikes overall, though, is a very utilized G-Zone. I think actually like a really strong card in this list is the Mecha Instructor. His ability lets you essentially reset your board in tandem with Ambush Dexter, because when he's tucked to the bottom of the deck anytime, he gets to choose a card, bind it, and then recall it, and then Ambush Dexter gets to shove a rear guard to Soul, and you get to call 2 rears. So you're able to actually just like shove like a boosted Rorna to Soul, and then you get to grab like another Rorna and like a Agile fullback which can attack from the back row. Just a lot of very strong combo lines this deck has access to, and what like is the blend for all this together is the Premier Stride and Lawless King Galigabaris. You can have generally like 10 to 12 attack turns if you don't see a Hanali. This card can just kill you straight up. Like it's so good. It's very reminiscent of a Stride we'll get to later in Katrina of just how free value it is. So whenever your rear guard attacks, that unit gets plus 10k, and then on the end of the battle it goes to the bottom of the deck, and that's a mandatory effect. And then when it attacks, you can Soul Blast 1. You can choose 2 cards from your deck that are grade 2 or less, and you call them both to an open rear guard. You shuffle your deck, then you get to all your rear guards get boosted then after, so then you can call like double stand trigger, and you can get reset 1 Ambush Dexter twice. Like that's like the standard play, but overall it's really, really good. Would not sleep on this variant of Spikes at all. This is your very stock. You have really good high top end extenders like Skydiver to be able to just recycle attack pieces to the bottom of the deck, because you running out of fullbacks kind of feels bad, so you want to kind of mitigate that as much as possible. But overall, really, really, really solid deck. If it just had a way to out Hanali, I think this deck would actually be really phenomenal, and hopefully Spikes gets that in the future. But it's a pretty budget deck to get into if you're like really like new and it's like, oh, I played Dark States in Standard. I would really point you to this deck because this deck's absolutely phenomenal and really super fun to play. However, there is an alternative list if you like more loop style decks. We have the list for you. This uses OG Rising Nova, so you get access to your History Collection Stride. The benefit to this is you kind of try to perform a loop using Julian from the D series, and you're like, Devlin, this is locked behind Bruce. What does this mean? This list got 10th or 9th in New York, and because if you notice what the History Collection Stride name is, it's Flash Bruce. So it fulfills the condition to have a Bruce Vanguard with Julian if you do the Superior Stride. So Julian's, when it attacks the Vanguard, you can counterblast 1, it gets 2k, and then for each card in your damage zone. And then if you have a Vanguard with Bruce in its card name, you Soul Charge 1 for every 2 cards in your damage zone. Choose up to the same number of cards Soul Charged by this effect from your Soul, and you call them to open rear guards. You can loop this using Mecha Analyzer, which is put a unit in your Soul. When another rear guard is put into your deck, you may pay the cost. You choose up to 1 other rear guard, bind it face up. You may call that card from bind zone to open rear guard, and that unit gets plus 3k. You get this effect because you get to essentially just call more cards from deck out of Flash God Bruce. You get more extenders out of Fate Bomber and other things to continue to get the resources back through Laser Blackguard. It gets you to reset and recall, and so does Hive Maker, and it does have the way to out the Hanali with the Makani. So you have some ways to play through. This is an extreme high roll variant though. But the only way this deck stops this deck when it goes off is essentially the over trigger. It plays for Bobo to give you the damage threshold, so you always hit like Julian on time, like you can ping yourself up damage even more. And it's overall really strong. They just have good access to good cards. Violence Ace, again, phenomenal card. Being able to draw cards for every card face up in your G zone is pretty great. But these are the two lists that I have for spikes right now. There's also GB8 variants and other things that I know some content creators will be getting to hopefully soon that are very big in the Spikes Brothers community, but hopefully I put you guys on one of the best football teams in Vanguard. So if you love to rock out and love this aesthetic and love kind of like multi-attack decks, then this is absolutely the deck for you. Let's talk about one of my favorite combo decks inside Vanguard. Now we're here talking about Dark Irregulars. This, my friends, for those that follow me on the channel, know that this is a very fan favorite deck for me personally. I love No Life King combo. So this, I can truly say full-heartedly, is the true combo deck of Vanguard. This is where you have one turn to kill your opponent or you lose, because you just deck out straight up. You're just going through your entire deck, soul charging, drive checking everything, and it's a win or you barely have any like fallback play on after. But this deck is just so cool. So the main unit behind this is No Life King Death Anchor, this beautiful SVR, my favorite SVR in the game. When in place, you soul charge one, it gets plus 2,000 power for every single card in your soul. So if you have the lucky number 13, that's a free 26, and it's a 38k beat stick just right off the bat. It's really strong. But at the end of the battle attack, if you have 13 or more cards in soul, you get to counterblast one, put a card from your hand in 3 rear guards into your soul, ride a card from your soul as stand, and that unit gets plus 1 critical. So if you add another Death Anchor, you'll soul charge, check again for all of those cards you just added in the soul, plus the 4 and the 5th off the soul charge, and he just gets incrementally bigger. So you can do this multiple times, or you can extend one more time into Master of Gravity Barrel Magnus. For all of my standard players know what this guy is. If there are 15 or more, you get essentially all the effects of where you get to draw a card. Barrel Magnus gets plus 10k in a crit. If it's off the NLK effect, it will be plus 10k with 2 crit because of the NLK giving the crit. So it's 23, 3 crit. Have to respect it. And then both you and your opponent, you get a board reset. Except you get to call cards from Soul. And while that not may be overly powerful in Standard, you have very strong guard restricts into Premium, like Hope on Dump, of when your Soul has 20 or more cards on place, your opponent can only call original shield value 20 at the same time. So they can't call like a 10 and a 5 at the same time. They have to call, they can't call like a 10 and a 15 at the same time, or a 10 and a 5. It has to be exactly 20 every time they put cards on the Guardian Circle, which unfortunately can just like rip through hand and end the game. Very, very, very strong combo in terms of you get like the whole shebang off. But how do we kind of get there, and how do we make sure that this can swing multiple times? Well, DI has an access to a starter called Enigmatic Assassin. Enigmatic Assassin allows you to essentially keep popping her in and out of soul, and she lets you go through and extend on a higher ceiling. So she's a rear guard that's going to constantly come out of soul, so she's going to be your third every time. And she is so fantastic because she gets power, so she's not a bad attacker either. She's going to be a 20k attacker most times inside this deck. So you're just able to get a continually high ceiling. You can loop her with this promo Covid Succubus to countercharge to make sure you're not counterblast denied for your NLK combo. Soul charge a little more, draw more cards. But then the beautiful promo of Deep Geldis is the crazy card. So you get to Soul Blast your V starter out of the soul, and then target a unit on your board, and you search up to the same number of units that you have in the deck, put them into your soul. So you can get your variance Killer Tail, which we will cover in a second, or you can get more Dimension Creeper just to fuel your soul even more. This card is absolutely fantastic, and I think made DI even better. The less CV soul charging we have, the better, so that way we can put more focus into NLK's top end. But why is having multiple copies of Variance Killer Tail so good? So Variance Killer Tail lets you put a card from Damage Zone or your drop into Soul and rest her, and then you have 3 Variance Killer Tail in Soul. You can restand her and you countercharge one. Because if you took this card from damage, you put the top card of your deck face down in the Damage Zone, but you get to immediately countercharge that, so that's a plus. But this means you can recycle your Dimension Creepers, and you get to Soul Charge more with them. When you Soul Blast them out, you Soul Charge too. So this sub-engine between Killer Tail and Dimension Creeper is a very good engine. And then you also have a draw engine with Fuginlin. If you open one of these and are able to call it to rearguard and not get it removed, it's going to soul charge you 3 cards while trying to draw you further into your combo pieces. And always drawing Dimension Creeper feels really dead. Being able to shove it to soul for free is really, really strong. So don't doubt on that at all. And then of course we play Gagameld Held because we're a very Vanguard centric deck in terms of like we get to swing it a bunch of times. So yeah, of course I'd love an extra 10k and a crit on that bad boy. But then in Premium Collection 2022, we got another Dimension Stride. This is Ultimate Deep Hades Emperor 4 Fox, and this is the highest top-end card we have in the deck. So at the end of the battle, your grade 3 Vanguard swings at your opponent's grade 3 Vanguard. You can counterblast 1 and discard 5 cards from your hand. If your soul has 13 or more cards, you can stride him for face down in your Vanguard as stand. If your deck has 13 or less cards, you can choose 3 critical triggers from your soul and put them back to deck. Pretty dangerous when you have 1 card left in deck, I must say. Getting able to put those resources back for free is absolutely impeccable. This is the main stride you will go into using the NLK loop. However, a good follow-up stride is Blader Mouse for when you kind of hit a grind game, like you don't kill, like your opponent maybe unfortunately hit the OT, like in your mid combo. It kind of sucks. So Blader Mouse actually lets you put all of your grade 0 units back to your deck from soul and or rearguard circle, and he's phenomenal. He's so good. I love the fact that he's just able to recuperate all that lost value and just shove your deck full of triggers so your defensive value is very, very high. It's absolutely something that I would not take for granted at all. You have some other finishers. Maybe you have Garvons if you haven't gotten your soul up to 13. Like 13 is your make or break, and most good players are going to damage deny you just to kind of avoid, because this high roll can be so terrifying because of No Life King. But this deck, if you love combo decks, you will absolutely have a blast playing DI and Premium. If you guys really do love Barrow Magnus, you guys get to transition one of your favorite D-Series bosses to Premium. Like, this deck is so much fun. I could talk about this deck for almost as long as I could talk about Great Nature, just because this deck is still really fun. It's been the same deck for a long time, so if you invested into this deck is still very good. And I think that Deep Geldis has really improved the quality of this deck for a long time. So I hope you guys really enjoy DI's No Life King combo. There's some other archetypes, but they're not really fleshed out, and I feel they're not as viable, and I'm trying to go for the most viable lists as possible. But if you guys want me to go over deck logs or other things for some other options for DI, I'd be happy to do so. But that's going to do it for our favorite Dark Boys. Let's roll into Gear Chronicle. Now we are going to dump into everyone's favorite steampunk clan. This is Gear Chronicle. This clan does so much and has had to be hit for the past couple of seasons now, but this clan still has access to really good combo lines, really good ceiling, top end extenders, and everything. So we're going to first talk about Steam Maidens, which has kind of been like the premier deck for the past year or so for Gear Chronicle. So of course we're going to talk about Elul. Elul is a very, very strong Vanguard. So she sets you up for a very good ride-up turn if you have been able to get the setup, but now you sort of more lean on Chronojet for that ride-up turn. So she is here now to kind of set up that at the end of the battle, your rearguard with Steam Maiden and a card named attack. You bind that unit, you choose a card grade equal to the card bound for this cost, grade +1, and you get to call that from your bind zone and call it to rearguard. And if you call it a grade 1, you counter charge. There's a lot to unpack here. This is the most broken card in the deck, and Enterana. Enterana is a walking +3. If you guys have not checked out my Gear Crisis video, please go do so, because I explain in depth why this card is a problem. This card will CB, grab Cat, call it, activate Cat skill to grab another Steam Maiden from deck. And as you can see, we play 4, 7, 11, 12, 16 Steam Maidens plus 2 heal triggers. So 18, pretty good. However, though, the high roll gets a little bit better because you're able to set up more force markers, which is what Steam Maidens wants when they do their whole Steam Maiden combo. Being able to counterblast 1 during your turn when those units G-stride, you may pay the cost. If you do, you can spin a rearguard at the bottom of the deck, but where you get this power from is you get this from Lost Age Dragon, which gives you some board control, which actually is really good into the Narukami matchup. You know, getting to spin that Demolition Dragon to the bottom of their deck, overtly powerful. So do not sleep on the ability to do that. There's a bunch of different though, like lines. Like TikTok Worker lets you against go the grade +1 through the time leap mechanic, which is the next deck we're going to be talking about. And essentially, your progression for the Elul combo is where you start with a Uluru, you progress to a Elul, and then you'll get to a Elul, and then you'll get to an Elul here, and that's just how that's just how it goes. You try to progress up that way. You also have Nabu and stuff for some guard restriction and some soul value benefit, which is very strong. And then your main stride, more than likely not, you're going to get into Highbrow, Steam, Schlishma. When this unit attacks, you bind a front row rear guard, so you're setting up that bind zone again. And you choose 2 cards from your bind zone, you call them to rear guard circle, and all your front row units gets plus 10,000 power until the end of the turn. And then G zone at the end of battle, your grade 3 rear guard attack. If this card's face up, you can soul last 1, bind that unit, and call this card to rear guard circle. So when you do your whole Elul combo, you don't have to then continue to bind you just soul last 1 and get to call this card from your G zone to rear guard, and it's very strong. You have a little bit other options in the G zone, but we're going to talk about those. Barrel Lock, though, is a great way to set up your bind zone, because instead of having to discard a heal for G Guardians, you can literally just bind 1 or more rear guards with the sum of their grade being 3 or greater. So this sets up your bind zone. It gets plus 5,000 card, plus 5,000 shield for each card bound by it, so it can get up to 25k shield, which is still nothing to scoff at. Plus it sets up your entire bind zone for the next turn, so very, very strong. And that's kind of like the premiere there. Let's talk about the old school time leap. This is David Beck's list from, I believe it was Austria. He does play the crest, so if you don't have the crest though, it's not really needed. It's just more of a higher scale ceiling, because you do get the automatic 10k from the crest if you do go first with the Lost Age Dragon. That way, like, the rest of your strides are actually like very high numbers. Your big thing is getting to use Mellum plus TikTok to essentially go up a bunch of cards, and you just get a giant force stack of 1 force marker, and you just do a whole chain up and do a bunch of multi attacks using like History Maker Dragon to time leap it, and you choose one of the other rear guards, so you're just able to go up multiple grades. You have Zayed, which is pretty powerful, so you just your low end overall is not really faulty. Then you play the blue over trigger to get some more value back from the drop zone. Overall, though, you have your Urwatar to draw you more cards. Like, overall, again, it's very strong. And then you have your Lost Gear Dog 8. This is the best ride consistent fixer inside the entire deck. For your strides, while Schlishma is very powerful, you have History Build Dragon, which can time leap your entire board, so you can pop up by 1, because you get to time leap the same number of rear guards as the number of face-up cards in your G zone. So he's very strong. If you do this, you can time leap like up to 3 off of you if this is your next stride after doing a Lost Age Dragon. So overall, 10 out of 10, very strong. We recommend both of these decks to play if you're getting into Gear Chronicle. For the final clan in the Dark Stage / Dark Zone, of course we couldn't give it but the final act. We're going to be talking about Pale Moon. Yes, the Circus clan. This is an amazing Excel clan with so much fun combo lines. This is probably, it's really hard to say. It's really tied between DI and Pale Moon as my 2 favorite Dark Zone, Dark State clans. Because, you know, Harry is a very, very fun Pale Moon deck. I also really enjoyed playing Nightmare Dolls for some time, so we're going to talk about all of this. This is Derek Dow's winning list this season. This list is so cool. So for those that don't know what Harry does, let's talk about we play Masked Magician Harry to generate a bunch of Excel markers. We have this ride up turn that lets us get 2 Excel markers and have a little bit of like a multi-attack front, and then we feel pretty comfortable. We're then able to follow that up by riding into the V Masked Magician Harry. If one could resonate. And it says when placed, you will generate that Excel marker, so you'll draw another card because you're always going Excel 2 with this deck. And you add that additional rearguard circle, and you put all of them on top of each other, so they're not alternating like other Excel decks. It becomes a giant Excel circle. But every time you generate a new Excel, you're still going to draw a card. So there's some very powerful things here. And that becomes the designated stage in the deck, which 2 units in this deck care about because of Lore Pop Pigeon saying, hey, when it's at the end of the battle, the end of the attack, if it's on the stage, you can counterblast 1, return it to your hand, search your deck or soul, or drop up to 1 Starry Pop Dragon, call it to the stage. If you search your deck, you shuffle. Starry Pop says when it's placed on the stage, you get an imaginary gift excel. So it's again increasing that stage by another 5,000 power. And this is the cool part. If it's 40,000 power or greater, it gets a crit and a sentinel restrict when it attacks. So it's very, very, very good. We'll never sleep on the ability for Starry Pop. Starry Pop can also be looped with Purple Trapezist, which will shove a rearguard in a soul and then can shove and call a rearguard back out. To get more on place effects, you can abuse that with Starry Pop to draw more cards with the Excel 2s. Just overall, very, very strong general game plan. But we get to talk about kind of more about the funny things that Pale Moon can do. So Pale Moon has a Rhoda in the deck, has a search anything with the Prankster Girl of Mirland. When this touches the soul, you get to put this card back in your deck and add anything from your deck to your soul. So you really get to tutor what your toolbox has access to. You're calling cards from soul constantly in this deck. It is so much fun. Princess of the Night Sky lets you grab anything grade 2 or less from your deck and put it to your soul. But what you can do is once you are at GB, if you are on the right up turn for Hari with the Masked Magician G era, you're able to then grab Mirland, and then Mirland can fulfill if you need to like add the Tricky Assistant to the soul, or you need to add the Starry Pop Dragon to your soul. We also have access to Lovely Companion. This is a card that can call cards out of your soul to the rearguard circle. And because of that, you can call Tricky Assistant. You have a Pseudo Denial Griffin play inside Pale Moon because of this. You also have a almost straight up Denial Griffin with Flexion Chimera, but Flexion Chimera is your opponent's choice, so it works more like of an impede than it does a straight up Denial Griffin or straight up like your choice. Your choice is a lot more powerful, but still very strong to be able to call Tricky Assistant or a Hanali out during the battle phase. You have free extenders too, like Misdirection, which just is when another unit's called from soul, she calls herself from soul, which is really, really strong. You also have Red Star Dual Horn, which can give you a little more top end for a little more calls out of soul. Overall, very, very, very strong. Well, why is Pale Moon still relevant? Well, it's in this main stride that you're going to see out through all three of these decks. It is Dark Lord Princess, hands down the best stride on Pale Moon. You get to stride again for attacking your opponent's Vanguard. So at the end of the battle, it attacked a Vanguard, you get to flip a card face up in your G zone and stride a G unit face up that has power and the Magi ability from your Vanguard stood, and you give it drive -2, and then you call the Dark Lord Princess to a rearguard circle. Well, you can call her to the stage, have her get more power, and either stride into Yvette to get yourself another Oxel marker and call a card from soul and give that unit 15k, or you can go into Masquerade Master Harry, which then entail you can counterblast 1, suck into your soul a bunch of different cards, about 3, and then you're able to extend on top of that more. And with all of the access to all the multiple card calls that you have out of your deck between Purple Trapezist and other things, it becomes a really free reset, and you can just really abuse Starry Pop Dragon in a lot of cards. So definitely and absolutely worth it. This deck is tons of fun. Shout out to Derek for topping with us this season. For 2023, this was really cool to see. This is one of my favorite decks inside Pale Moons, like hands down. He got me to play this deck, so seeing it being played again and doing well was awesome to see. But yeah, a bunch of different combo lines, so many points to pilot. This deck is a little complex to pilot, but still tons of fun. If you enjoy combo decks, you'll also enjoy this because there's just so many different lines of play you can do. It's really like a Yu-Gi-Oh deck. Moving next into Nightmare Dolls. Nightmare Dolls has the ability to ride down, so you can pseudo-deny your opponent the stride and kind of force them into the History Collection strides if they have that option available to them through Nightmare Doll Carol's ability. And yeah, this deck's really interesting. So when you're grade 3, rearguard is put into your soul, you can counterblast 1, discard 2 cards from your hand, you ride a Workroid from your soul as stood, and that unit gets drive -1. What happens to me that Lillian is a Workroid, so this is kind of your main target you want to ride into if you're doing that ride down play because she's a 10k base. And she also soul charges when she's placed on top of, but most of these Nightmare Dolls are name locked, or they need Workroids to interact. Overall though, this deck is very, very strong. It's still super consistent. The fact that from BRO 2020, it's been carrying still is very strong. And you being able to go back down into grade 2s turns your Rolex back on. So they're kind of like you're kind of safe against early rush if you play this deck. This deck is still very, very good. Again, you have the same lines of Princess plus Yvette, and you also have the ability now to go into Leonetta. Leonetta's really good inside Nightmare Dolls because you keep all the different zones in those Excel markers. So when she attacks, you can counterblast one, discard a card from your hand, and then you put all of your Irregulars into Soul. And then for each card you put into Soul, you can choose up to 2 unit cards from your Soul and call them to rear. And then if you called 4 more different grades until the end of turn, when your opponent would call cards from her hand in Guardian Circle, she must call 2 or more. So it gives that Battle Door effect. If you have multiple Excel circles, because you know you've been rewriting from Carol and stuff, and you've been setting up your plays, this is very, very strong, so please do not sleep on this. Your main win con, though, involves an Alice loop, so you want a bunch of counterblasts to be able to counterblast Soul Blast, and you will restand Leslie. So you're able to counterblast one, Soul Blast one. You shove Alice at the end of the battle it attacked into Soul, and you'll call out Ginny. Ginny then, when it's placed on Mirror Circle, shoves it to Soul and calls an Alice from Soul, and it gets 5k. Well, when Alice is called from Soul, Nightmare Doll Leslie restands. So if you have her on Excel 2, you've given her some power off a Vanguard drive check. Let's say you hit a crit or something. You can have some power, give it some power, all that good stuff. If you've given it 2 triggers, let's say it's the 32k. That can just always restand every time you call out the Alice. So when you get kind of into these higher damage thresholds, that loop can be pretty dangerous. Not to mention that you also have a counter charger inside Abigail, which can add you back pieces from your Soul. So overall, this deck is extremely consistent, very good. The end play is Dust, just to prevent your opponent from G-guarding and other things like that. Just very, very powerful. Set your opponent to 1, do a bunch of multi-attacks, win the game. Is definitely the best finisher that this deck has access to. Again, you're going Excel 2, you're a combo deck, you want to draw cards, you have to see your pieces to win the game. So absolutely no reason why you should be going into anything other than that. Then finally, we have Silver Thorns. Logan Johnson is doing, my teammate Logan is doing a deck profile on this exact list here coming up soon. So there will be a little more in-depth explanation, so I'm going to touch on this lightly. This is very name-specific deck, like Revengers and other things that we've already covered, is that you really need Eradicators and all that stuff too, the good-unquote sub-clans. And these sub-clans just give you access to very powerful effects. So your main is Venus Lucier. Your ride-up turn, you get a bunch of imaginary gift excels. And then if you have Dorian, you can draw a bunch of cards on that ride-up too. Dorian's your big value engine inside this deck, and you'll actually see this card sometimes played in Harry because of how free it is. You then go for Silverthorn Assistant Zelma. She's free because when this unit's placed on Rearguard Circle, if you have a Pale Moon Vanguard, you can pay the cost. You can choose a card with Silverthorn as card name other than a card name this name, and you get to call it to Rearguard. So it's your pseudo-free Purple Trapezist inside this deck list for Silverthorn. Overall, though, this deck is actually pretty consistent. Getting Rising Dragon as a really good beat stick, I think, is what the deck needed for sure, because it kind of lacked power, but this deck is still super, super fun. Again, you're still going for your regular Dark Lord Princess into either Yvette or Harry plays, because it's just super, super consistent. And you also have your Leonetta. Once you get enough excels, that card's just a straight up finisher on its own. So please, please, please do not sleep on Silverthorn. But I'm gonna let Logan take that one away once I get that video up and rolling. But yeah, this deck's super fun. You have access to a bunch of other things. It still does the same typical Pale Moon stuff. It's just a little more name specific. But Logan's gonna cover all the combos inside that lines, because there's so many, and it's just super cool to see. But that's gonna wrap up the Dark Zone, baby, with the final act. Let's move on into Stoicheia / Zoo and Megalonica, baby. Well, now let's meet the mob and start Zoo off with Megacolony. So this is my list that I took to BCS White Plains. This is the traditional Dark Face control style deck that you see now with the new History Collection. That still has some remnants of the Cradle support with Sweet Cocktail and things. But let's talk about what Megacolony does. Megacolony is one of the true control clans inside Vanguard, because they have a whole entire stride that forces your opponent to skip their stand phase, pretty much. All of their units, including their Vanguard, will not stand during the stand phase when Gridora is activated. And so because of how powerful this card is, a lot of Megacolony decks are built around a bunch of multifaceted control engines, and so Darkface happens to be one of them, which is when a unit is called, you can Soul Blast 2 and rest that unit. The big thing is that this unit doesn't target, so even if the card has resists, it still gets rest. Something very cool that you guys should know. But the more powerful now, that the fact that it's a GB2, is that we got access to the History Collection Stride. Of course, and we're going to make 2 protect ones because we're a control deck. We want to protect ourselves, prolong the game, and kind of choke our opponent out with a win inside the grind. If you guys want like a lot more in-depth, like per card choice and per everything, I go at length inside my BCS analysis video. So please go check that out if you have not. But essentially, the deck revolves around utilizing Darkface's skill to keep off control effects, and you're gaining soul from using Battler S, which Battler S can also serve out as another deck out function. So if you get to a really long game with your opponent and you have 4 rearguard circles open, you can actually just straight up deck them out because you force them to draw a card and then call a card from hand, and if you can do that enough and leave them 1 card in deck, they will just straight up lose. It is a deck out loop that we kind of have similar to Melista, but yeah, it is what it is. We also have very powerful access to cards such as Brilliant Blister, which can force rest a unit code, so it can stop like Leslie from restanding if we're playing as a Nightmare Doll's Looper, a lot of things like that. It's just overall very strong. But the other really strong part about Ghidorah is that you limit where your opponent can play from. They can only call cards from hand. So they cannot G-Guard, they cannot call from Soul, they cannot call from Drop, they cannot call from anywhere except from hand. No deck, no nothing. And this is what makes Ghidorah such a powerful card, because not only does it lock down your opponent's units and prevent them from calling, but then it also generates multi-attack. So when she swings, you can Soul Blast once your deck for up to grade 3 and call it to rearguard circle, and it gets plus 10k. You're calling Hell Demise, and Hell Demise is going to stand another rearguard. So most of the time you're getting 5 attacks a turn because you're able to put back these Hell Demises that you're calling out with High Class Moth to counter charge. Again, I have so many cards listed for if you're trying to figure out why I play certain cards like this old Brilliant Blister. It prevents Vanguard restanding and so much more. Just overall, very, very worth it. There's also access to other strides such as Obturandus and things that are just Counterblast 2, choose a card from your hand, discard it, and then your opponent can't call cards to rearguard circles. So this is really important, like in the Bermuda matchup and things. Just overall, can't do better than it for real. But GB2 Darkface is very strong, but the thing with general bugs is that it can't get to that very consistently. So we're going to cover now the machining deck type that has still this Darkface engine inside it. And the benefits to machining is that machining actually generates a lot of soul. Unironically, this deck generates a lot of soul between machining Hornet going to your soul on hit. On a Vanguard, you look at the top 6 cards, reveal up to 1, grade 3, put it in your hand, shuffle your deck. If you put a card in your hand, you shove that unit into your, you shove little ant here into your soul. Also, more cards with, in this card name, you get to shove, put a card from your hand into soul off the Scatterhorn. You just make a lot more consistent amount of soul by just doing that. It's just very, very strong. Can't doubt on this at all. But the other cool part here is that you actually get another in-self multi-attacker with Machining Princess. So you can give her the ability Counterblast 1, stand this unit, and until the end of turn it gets plus auto rearguard at the end of the battle that it attacked. Vanguard, you can choose one of your opponent's stood units as 0. You can choose one of your other rearguards with Machining in its card name as stand it. So you can actually do some ping pong back and forth with this deck. But again, the main advantage to this deck is it's almost the exact identical G-Zone. You just now get the ability to attack a little more times, and you get more soul inside the ability to get continually just more soul, just so you can continually activate that Darkface GB2. And then the final deck list we'll cover Megacolony is a mill deck. So if you enjoy mill deck from other clans and everything, this deck is kind of fun for you. You just now completely ignores Darkface, goes away from Darkface. You still play Ghidorah and all the good control cards, but you now get access to Gun and Colio. So when placed, this unit gets plus 5k and a drive until the end of turn, and then you put the top card of your opponent's deck into the drop zone. If it's grade 3 or greater, it gets plus 10k and a drive until the end of turn. Very, very powerful effect. Can sometimes just potentially get quad drive. You can Soul Blast a grade 3, put the top card of your opponent's deck into the drop zone. Your opponent cannot call the same grade as that card until the end of her turn. So you get cards now like Brutal, Brawny Jerk, and more cards that mill inside this deck. So you kind of just gradually like deck your opponent out over time. And this is kind of the point of this deck. I mean, again, these deck logs are going to be in the description below in that Google Doc. But you're still kind of doing like the similar grind game plan, like milling your opponent out and stuff. It's just the name of the game. And of course, you cannot not play Sweet Cocktail. This card gives a Cradle Marker, which essentially invalidates the unit it stands. But when that unit is retired, you get to search your deck for a card equivalent to that card's grade. So overall, you have a lot of fun ways to play Megacolony. I personally think Darkface is the way to go, just because that Soul Blast 2 is very powerful to prevent some like rest effects sometimes, like especially against Nova Grapplers and things like that. You being able to rest the Gunsden before they can activate it is super, super impactful. So yeah, that is going to do it for bugs. Let's see what the plants are doing next. Now we venture into the garden and see what's going on with Neo Nectar. So we're going to be going over 2 deck lists today. We're going to be going over a more Katrina plant token based variant. And then we're going to go over a more like Asha focused variant for Neo Nectar. With Katrina being unbanned, this stride here is the best stride that Neo Nectar hands down has ever gotten. It's when placed, you flip a card face up in your G zone and you call a plant token that's 0 plus 5k until the end of turn. You get to call up to the same number of plant tokens as the number of face-up cards in your G zone. And then all of your plant tokens get plus 10k until the end of turn. And then when it attacks, you search your deck for up to the same number of cards as the number of plant tokens on your rearguard circle, and you call those to rearguard circles. So this card is absolutely free. This is the card I was alluding to when we were talking about Galley Gabaris with Spike Brothers. The Galley Gabaris was Katrina 2.0. This card is absolutely free, and because you flip a card face up, you can flip up this card called Cyclone, and plant tokens have no skills whatsoever. So they get the 5k buff from Cyclone being face up in the G zone, which gives units without a continuous act or auto abilities plus 5,000 power, and that stacks. So the more Cyclones you get face up, the bigger those plant tokens become, and boy, is that really powerful. But in terms of discussing good old Asha combo here, is that they don't play the superior ride vanilla version like I do, which you want to see my profile is up on my channel. This though lets you get a bunch of force markers, so you can get your front row filled with force 2 on your first Katrina stride, which is pretty impactful because your numbers can get very large very quickly, and then it lets you call more plant tokens, so your Katrina can be like a little more viable going up. This though, Enos is kind of like your best defensive play you have access to. So when it's placed on Vanguard or Rearguard, you can counterblast 1, Soul Blast 1, you look at the top 5 cards of your deck, you choose one from among them, you call it to Rearguard, and then you shuffle your deck, and if another unit with the same card name is on your board as the called unit you called off this effect, you get to draw a card, and then when your other Rearguard is placed by your card's ability, it gets plus 5k until the end of turn, which is very powerful to use in tandem with Rain Breath Dragon. So if you call a, let's say you call a Antero, and you have 4 tokens on the board, Antero is going to give your Vanguard plus 20, and then off of Enos's effect is going to get plus 25. You can also call another Enos off that Rain Breath Dragon while you have an Enos on your Vanguard circle, and then call a plant token generator like Sylvia, who will call a plant token, and then you get plus 15k off that Enos. So very, very powerful cards you have access to. You have very fun defensive plays to kind of like fill up your board against Narukami to turn them off of certain effects. So overall, very, very strong. Do not sleep on this. I think that this deck is like absolutely great. And I think that this is a really fun way to play Neo Nectar. Katrina, like focusing on the high end of the plant tokens, is absolutely, I think, the perfect way to go. But if you want to play Asha, like more pure, you can play the old G Asha. They're the same, they're just different arts. This is the like original Asha, and this is the zero art Asha. Essentially, that when she's strode upon, you get to clone a unit, so you kind of must want to search your deck for the same card name and call it. And you get access again to the Obora. And the Obora is going to give you 2 force markers. Most of the time you want to go Force 2 just because you're going to get a copy crit in this deck, or your numbers get really big. Again, like you see the Katrina down here in tandem with the Cyclone is just very powerful. Like you go in Plant Token Helmet, doesn't hurt you at all. But the thing with Asha, more Asha focused decks, is you get to play Ranunculus Flower Maiden Asha, and actually this list is missing a very important promo that I will actually live time edit for you guys, so that way you guys can see what is going on, so I can give you guys the correct deck list, because I think this one forgot about this card. This is Pure Maiden Katrina. You definitely want to play this card because when it's placed on Vanguard or Rearguard Circle, you get to look at the top 3 cards of your deck, choose one card with Asha's card name, and you add it to your hand, put the rest on the bottom. If you did not reveal, you get to call a plant token. So no matter what, you're getting value off this card, and then you get to counterblast one, retire a plant token, you get to choose one of your Vanguards with Asha's card name. It gets triple drive until the end of turn. So you get a really strong like ride up if you don't see another Asha to like discard. This card is very good because it gives you the ability to have a lot of high end. So we are going to get this junk out of here, and I think we can cut that by 1, and we're going to cut this by 1. Yep, that's how we're going to do it. And we're going to save the we're going to actually name it first. We're going to name it Asha. Asha deck. No, not like that. We're going to name it Asha deck there. We're going to create, and we are going to lock in with the good old juice and confirm this deck for you guys, because Katrina is just such a high key impactful card inside the main deck. Because of this, though, you get access to a couple other things. You get access to the actual main Asha effect, which is during your turn, if you have 2 or more units with Asha in their card name, she gets 10k, and if there's 3 or more, she gets a critical. You get a Soul Blast one retire to your rearguard, and you call an Asha Flowers Fairy token to the rearguard circle, which the Asha Flower Fairy token is to copy the exact stats of Asha. You get to copy the name, the power, and the critical of Asha, so that's why Force 2 is actually really powerful, because you're actually able to pre-buff the Ashas already, so just having them be more threatening with the crit and stuff is very, very good. And this Asha can also just, when placed though, she makes 2 plant tokens, so if you go for a more Katrina line of play, she is very good. But the Ranunculus Asha you get access to. But when you also play Asha, you get access to one of the last like really cool dimensional strides inside Neo Nectar, and that's Sandream. And so Sandream can eat 2 tokens. Then you counterblast 1, and then when it's strided on your Vanguard circle, it gets plus 10k in a crit until the end of turn. So you're actually able to do all of your Asha stuff and then do that as an act ability. So very, very strong. You can copy your stats even more, so you can have like a 3 crit Vanguard and then like a really big rear guard in the Asha Flower Fairy token. So don't sleep on this card. It's very good. And don't sleep on this deck in general. It can just kind of like win games out of nowhere, but still Katrina being back really helps this deck, as Katrina again is just the premier stride for Neo Nectar. But now let's get to class, because I got my favorite clan to talk about. So now we move on into the clan that is absolutely synonymous with this channel, with Great Nature. I'm going to be able to cover 3 decks that I think are kind of slated the best for you to get started playing Great Nature. Of course, we're going to start with Big Belly here, the best panda around. So Big Belly got an upgrade with History Collection, and I will be doing my profile here shortly. This is kind of the deck list if you guys want to preview, but I'll be going a lot more in depth of like why I play certain cards. But Big Belly here got the upgrade with History Collection, being the 0 art to get 2 Excel markers early, so you're able to set up for better offensive combo plays later inside your turns. And the big thing with that is like Wisdom Teller, being like every time a unit swings, if it's 20k or greater, you get to draw a card. So with like Restanders on that kind of like pseudo stride up turn is what I call them, you get Spool Mary out on the board, and then if you smack her on the rear guard, you have her like boost and get some of the 4k buffs. She's actually always just going to be like 23 plus, so she's always going to be able to get you that draw card. And then with Big Belly's on stride, you're able to give her on hit pressure to draw more cards. So actually that small little stride up turn can actually like draw you a bunch of cards. I've ended with like 15 in that turn just after hitting some triggers and stuff. So overall, very, very strong. But then you want to fall back on Big Belly's ability to draw cards during the end phase and the battle phase when your units are retired by a card effect. So it's really, really good. You farm so much in this deck, being able to call plant tokens for the Narukami matchup to either force them out or just plant tokens in general then to G-Guard and go into Ardillo, which will let you draw a card for every unit that you retire off the Big Belly's auto ability for V Big Belly. It is very strong. It's like one of your better defensive plays now that we lost access to Spangled as a clan. Rip Spangled, you did nothing wrong. But then again, you have like your perfect restanders with Amazing Professor Big Belly and Crayon Tiger, which is like an absolute staple. Like if you need a card for Great Nature, it is this one. And then you still get access to your defensive draw crits, which is just absolutely amazing that we get to play 8 crit or 10 crit now inside of Big Belly, just more for that pressure, because then it makes our rhinos more threatening, especially on top of the Calidrius turns that we get, which Calidrius is a stride that gives 10k to all of our front row rear guards and then gives the ability to restand one with 30k or greater and then give it triple door. So if you put that on a rhino, your opponent has to guard with 3 or more cards from hand, and none of them can be a grade 0. Which is absolutely fantastic. And there's so many other small combo lines, but that will be covered in this Big Belly deck profile. But again, this is just the list if you want to get started with my thoughts and everything. But this is a great starting point because this is kind of like your mid-range deck for Great Nature, just using Oxel 2 and just farming a lot of advantage. Just feels really, really good. The next list I'm going to cover is kind of one of more Great Nature's premier control lists with Isabel. Isabel is a lot more of a tempo deck. You are doing a lot of reactionary stuff to what your opponent is doing, and you have this ability to kind of like make lotteries perform both, which is important for Mary Martin for a Denial Griffin combo where we can blow up an entire opponent's column, and this bypasses resist, which you can call during your opponent's turn using the Almirage G-Guard, which is Soul Blast 1. When it's placed, you call up to 2 cards from your hand, and then you choose 4 and they gain resist and they don't retire when they're hit, which is really, really beneficial. So that top end's amazing, but also using the new G-Guard in Chibet Avil is always a PG because that trigger unit effect is always going to apply off of the Isabel Vanguard continuous when your opponent's at grade 3 as well. So really good overall. This time for this win con, instead of using like the Calidrius finisher, even though like Calidrius is still one of your main strides, you kind of fall back on the Zoa combo because you're just wanting to extend that far every time. So what you want to do is you want to find Zoa, get to the GB3 for them, discard a copy of Isabel, counterblast 2, draw a card, and then you're going to call a Rhino and give it that Quintet 9 power. And they can't call grade 0s when it swings, but if it's boosted with Monoculous Tiger, and off of Monoculous Tiger's effect, you Soul Blast 1. If you mill a trigger unit, then they can only guard with trigger units, but then they can't guard with grade 0s. So they really can't guard with cards from their hand off the Quintet 9, which is super powerful because actually the Black Liqueur Isabel lets you stack the top of your deck, so you can almost guarantee yourself always hitting the trigger, which is very, very powerful. You play Rollick and other stuff to kind of like mitigate the rush because again, this deck really thrives in the late game. This deck needs to reach the late game in order to be impactful. So that's just kind of where Isabel sits at. But essentially then through Zoa's effect, once that Rhino attack hits, that's unguardable. When this unit deals damage to your opponent's Vanguard, your opponent loses. So it's kind of that one-shot kill of death. So overall, very strong, but you need to be wary of Elementaria and other like guard stuff in the PGG guards. Just keep in mind like your matchups. Once you begin to learn more of the premium field, like through this video, you understand like where those abilities lie. And then finally, we're going to talk about Hamsuke Rush. This is from my good friend Kalen Lewis, my teammate, who only plays this deck. Like, he loves Great Nature, but like this by far is his favorite deck. So this deck is like the premier aggro deck for Great Nature. This deck is very rushy. Like you get to use the promo, get some twin drive action in there. So you like the pseudo V Blaster Dark. But the deck revolves around using Pencil Hammy to tuck all of your Hamsuke cards back on the bottom, so you like restand a bunch of times, get a bunch of increments of 4k power, and start passing it around the board to where all your numbers get substantially larger. And you really get to abuse Pencil Hero Hamsuke because this generates you multiple Oxels, so you don't really have to weaken your deck in terms of power off of your history collection strides, because you just get automatically those those 2 Excels going second. And then you go into any of these strides here. Tons of effects through that that cause. And you're able to go Bolaro, just pressure because you have such a large front row. Any attacks that hit, you get to draw cards. So it's very powerful, very impactful. You get through Hamden to get more power. Through Counterblast 1, since you have that additional rear guard circle off Pencil Hero, you're able to get through that. You have your countercharge access through Hamyuki, and then during battle phase countercharging with Pangolin, which is arguably like a staple too. So overall, very, very strong. you get to play the also the crit draws here because you really don't care about soul versus like in the Isabel list where you play the curious ponies where you actually need the soul to perform like a lot of your effects. So overall, very, very strong deck, very, very impactful. So yeah, there's a bunch of options to play in Great Nature. Please feel free to just flood and check out this channel of drawing a bunch of cards, playing mid-range, playing aggro, playing controls. Like for you, I go in depth on all of these different decks, and it's just super favorite. I love how this deck plays. So many different options inside the G zone. It's just really, really fun and really, really amazing to play. So I hope you guys enjoyed Zoo. Now we're going to move on to the blue clans inside Stoicheia. Let's get it, baby. So now we jump on into the Megacolony clans in the latter half of Stoicheia before we jump into Bermuda Triangle. But this is Aqua Force. This is Vanguard's Navy. So this deck is absolutely super cool. It's a bunch of rear guards that do multi-attack, so it's kind of similar to Great Nature and a couple other decks that have their, like a lot of their restanding Vanguards, and like they do a bunch of different things. But Aqua Force counts the number of attacks that happen in a turn, so you'll see this like wave mechanic that is very, very good. So just kind of starting off with a general tip on Aqua Force, this is a list actually brought to you by Commander Jaime, and he was so gracious to give me this list. He was actually about to do a deck profile on it, and I hit him up. I was like, hey, I need an Aqua Force list. You're one of the best I know. Can you give it to me? So he gave this to me, and so you have actually these long spread out ranges of like old like Thavis. So you have this OG Thavis, so you have 3 OG Thavises and 1 V Thavis. V Thavis gives you access to that ride down play for Stride Denial, and the other G Thavises give you access to your History Collection Stride, which gives you more Excel markers. You're always going Excel, so you want to see these amazing rear guards that you have with like Pursuit Assault, that gives you a lot of advantage, and Repress Strike. There's so many cards that just do so many like very valuable things on the attack lines. He also plays Valios, which is also going to be another main staple in the next deck list we're covering, because Valios gets to actually lock your opponent's power at 11k, and it cannot increase by damage triggers. So if they're like at 4 and a damage trigger like can save them, well, it doesn't if you strode on top of Valios. They also have access to Farigous Dragon, which gives them another Excel marker. So like off the straight generation between those two, you can get 3 Excel markers, and that's just a lot of very valuable stuff. You have access to Genbold, which can call more cards from the top of your deck, so you get to flood out your board. And then you also have this Stride version of Valios, which can lock out your opponent's power as well. Some main things to kind of highlight here for V Thavis is this is actually really big out to the Megacolony matchup, because you can pseudo stride into Lambros, which gives your ability to restand your entire board. And then you have access obviously to the good cards like Coral Assault and other things. A big thing I'm seeing here that's missing is a Narissa, but I know Commander Jaime, when he's going to bring out this deck profile, will explain why these choices are as such. But overall, again, really good suite, very aggressive deck that loves to farm its value, and so that's what it's able to capitalize on. So that is Thavis for you all. Then we're going to talk about Blue Wave. Blue Wave is a little more combo oriented. You know, you're able to play into Tetra Drive, you're able to play into Valios again for the power locking. There's just so much free value found inside Blue Waves, with also having the heal and the crit. The crit goes back to deck, and this is actually provided to me by one of Commander Jaime's friends. And he's using the Zorga order to increase his drive checks for when he has his right up turn with Tetra Drive Dragon, which I think is actually a pretty hot tech. The big thing here though is like just getting the order card, so you have to like kind of flood out on these to like have it be good, but it is what it is. Like a free stride up is pretty good. You get access when you play Blue Waves into Blue Wave Marshal Flood Hazard, because you have a heart with Blue Wave in its card name. And you have rear guards with Blue Wave in their card names, so you're able to restand him, get drive -3, then a GB3 gets plus a drive, so he's able to go back to a single drive when he restands. Tetra Boil just gives you more advantage, being able to restand after the 4th attack of the turn. Overall, just this is definitely the wave deck, the one that counts the most attacks, so this deck has a lot of good value built into it, and is definitely a lot more budget to try for sure. And then we get into Maelstrom. Maelstrom, I'd say, is kind of the weakest out of all the ones that has access to, like, the specific Maelstrom strides aren't that fantastic, and you kind of lose out on all the amazing rear guards that you have access to inside other decks. But The big thing here is like Maelstrom can like make some really weird like guard restrictions. So if you're able to, you know, just be able to turbo and get some cards into Soul, overall you have really good access to Maelstrom's ability to play by giving the guard restrict, like you can't guard with certain things off of Glory. And so overall, just high value, high pressure. You'll be, you know, finish with Alexandros really well. Just so that way on like the second or third attack, you can choose 2 of your rear guards and they get plus 5k for each face-up card in your G zone. It's kind of your main finisher inside Maelstrom, just because you're not generating tons of advantage, but it's definitely a deck you should for sure look at. But yeah, again, go check out Commander Jaime, go check out everyone that's been on Aqua Force grind content. This clan is very interesting to play, and not as a master, but as someone who has good general knowledge in what the game plan for the clan can do. It's very solid and is tons of fun to play, so definitely check them out if you're interested in playing Aqua Force in Premium. Now we move on in and talking about the best pirate fleet in Vanguard. This is Granblue. This is a deck that is all about playing from the drop zone or your graveyard. So if you loved other card games that played from their graveyard and did a bunch of pile stuff and like self-milled and everything, like this is your deck for sure. There are a bunch of powerful cards in Granblue, and Granblue is only kept in check by a few things in this meta, and it's really just under the cusp of being an absolute top tier powerhouse. This deck has been in the meta relevancy for quite a long time, and so I'm going to show you a more traditional Granblue list. This is what we call the Beatrice Toolbox, where you focus on using Ghost Leader Beatrice for her buffing the abilities of Ghosties by 5k and 5k shield and giving them the ability to intercept, as well as being your way to use a G-Guard called Negro Lily to revive anything during your opponent's turn. Which is very powerful because you have access to cards like Cannoneer, which then you can kill something with during your opponent's turn. So you now have access to a Denial Griffin Clay because of Beatrice's existence. On top of that, you can also revive this card called Greedshade, which Greedshade is arguably the most broken card in Vanguard. This says discard a card, discard the top 2 cards of your deck, and then add anything from your drop zone to your hand. So you can add a Heal Guardian back if you do off the Negro Lily combo, so that Heal Guardian that you pitch to G-Guard, you can just add back to G-Guard again. Very strong play. Just does so many things. The V Night Rose is also your best compatibility target with the bad bounty play. Which is going to let you re-ride this Night Rose during the middle of your battle phase. You get another Protect marker, so you're always going to Protect 1 kind of in this build of Granblue because it's more traditional. You're kind of more like long game, waited out, then just have a big explosive finishing turn. Because you're going to choose a column, call 2 cards. You're going to call this big card called Skull Dragon to a column, and a Beatrice behind it to call another Skull Dragon. Because this card's insane. This card gets 2k for every 1 card in your drop zone. So you get to really fill up your drop zone super fast by playing Navigator, which is rest 2 rear guards, you discard the top 5. So you can just like literally turbo mill your deck, get these really big, and just start slamming face with these large Skull Dragons. You also have a smaller Skull Dragon and Ghost Ship, which draws you a card immediately after the battle phase is attacked. And you have Column Bar to send anything from your deck to the graveyard. So this is the Foolish Burial for Granblue. Overall, very powerful deck. This is very basic though, so if you guys have seen very old like premium deck profiles, there's been countless of these ones done, and I want to get and talk about the nitty gritty of the new Granblue lists, which are found here. These Granblue lists are all about Vampire Princess of the Night Fog, Night Rose, the G-era version, because you get access to the on-hit stride of Bandit Rum. And you know when I was talking about Protect 2 Resurgence? Well, this is that deck exactly. You get so much good value on when you're able to get just on the attack hit, just revive something. And because you can go double Protect 2 onto 1 circle, you actually can make some units just straight up beat over a defensive, and having your Night Storm, which is your primary attack extender down the deck, beat over defensive is crazy. So at the end of the battle that Night Storm swings, you can resurrect a card that to a rearguard circle that he's not on. So you can call a Beatrice, and the Beatrice can Soul Blast 1 to resurrect another Ghost Ship or a Skull Dragon onto the Protect 2 circle that he was on. So you just get a lot of different finishing combo lines. And you can extend with him over and over again, because so like you can, if you find him off the Forbidal Surrogate, which the best Forbidal Surrogate combo is either you find Nightstorm and then you find either Dragon or Beatrice, to Beatrice just to resurrect something, or you can call the Night Rose if you think that this is a bad bounty esque matchup. You'll definitely want it. And this deck is so good. You have access to Grenache as your countercharger. Grenache is at the end of your turn. When you declare this hollow, it has to kill itself at the end of the turn. So when it retires, you get to countercharge to. It's absolutely free, and that fully fills the cost of your Negro Lily combo with Cannoneer, because it's the Negro Lily plus Cannoneer. And again, I'm going to shout out my boy Commander Jaime. He did a whole entire extensive combo line defensively on how you can effectively use Negro Lily in Granblue, and this clan is insane. Again, you play Greed Shade for a bunch of value. This card is still, I think, the best card in Vanguard. Being able to add anything back is insane. You have access to your new defensive draw criticals, which lets you play a little more higher draw engine in Granblue, which sometimes can be scary, but overall, just having a defensive, having an offensive crit and a defensive draw is still very, very powerful in this game. And it does so much. Your main finisher, though, is Bartholomew in this variant, because you just get to give your drop zone so high that this becomes a very scary Vanguard. Because not only does it resurrect cards during mid-battle phase with the skill, with the counterblast, being able to call different card names from the drop zone, they all get 5k, but when you have 30 or more cards in your drop zone, you have to guard each attack your opponent swings with if they're on Bartholomew with 3 or more cards from your hand. So it has that similar Crystal Luster, Chain Ranker, Guard Restriction that's just so potent. And this is why this card is very, very good. Just to turn my Guard Restriction, because if you're at 5 and you're doing the pokes between the Nightstorm and the Beatrice and resurrecting the Skull Dragons, it becomes very overwhelming for your opponent to deal with, especially if you've gone into your double protect 2 plays, because then you get a little bit higher power and you're able to like beat over like certain thresholds. However, there's also another cool line that you can do inside this list where you add Peter the Ghosty and Damien the Ghosty, so you get your full Time Leap package with a bad bounty when you go using Beatrice. So when you ride Beatrice again, she gets Protect 2 one more time, so you can put that all into one rearguard circle, give that unit plus 15k. And with Beatrice, you can essentially do a whole entire scale of when a rearguard is retired by a card's ability during your turn, you get to counterblast 1, call a card with a Ghosty in its card name that's less than a retired card from your drop zone. So as long as you have 1 CB up, you can do this entire effect. So Skull Dragon has an ability that retires himself at the end of the battle. Beatrice's skill will proc calling Jesse. If you've not used Jesse's bottom effect this turn, when it attacks, he gets plus 5k. So if you call him to that 3 stack of Protect 2s, he will be plus 20. So he will be 29 on his own, and then he will retire himself and countercharge 1. And then this will trigger Beatrice's skill to counterblast 1 again and call Damien. Damien doesn't gain power, but he is an 8k, so he does get 23, and he'll also get another 5k, so he'll actually be 34 off his own. My apologies with Jesse, because Beatrice buffs all ghosties. So Damien will be a 23, or a 28 rather. And then Damien countercharges, and if you play Peter the Ghosty starter, you get to end on Peter the Ghosty. And since Peter the Ghosty is a 10k and you're on 3 Protect 2s, and Beatrice grants them 5k shield and intercept, that Peter becomes a 45k interceptor. That is absolutely crazy numbers, and you got to do a little scaled down pseudo Steam Maiden time leap loop. You also have access to in Granblue the Stoicheia Sleeve Tugging Bell. This is essentially just to beat Narukami, so that way your bind zone doesn't get too out of control. But overall, this deck has just so many accesses to it too. You also have a Foolish Burial of 5 with Big Obadiah, just being able to take, hey, I have these 5 1-ofs in my deck that I need in the drop zone now, or I need to set up some other place, so I'm just going to grab a Bone, a Beatrice, a Cannoneer, a Greed Shade, and something else, and then resurrect some cards. Granblue just has plenty of tools at its disposal. It's a very favored clan. It has a clan that has just so much ceiling. Depending on what you see off your RNG, this deck is really crazy. So do not sleep on this deck at all. You have to respect this deck if you see it at a BCS. But overall, this deck is a lot of fun to play. The deck is definitely one that I've played a lot. I've owned, I think about through in my entire time of playing premium format specifically, I've owned Granblue about 4 times. Moved on from it because I wanted to play other things, but this deck is no joke. As a person who has piloted Granblue, this deck is tons and tons of fun, so I hope you enjoy. Now let's get on to some of our idols and some of the most annoying fishes ever. Now we're going to wrap up with our final blue clan. We are going to be talking about Bermuda Triangle. the most annoying fishes on the planet. So you guys have may already seen this deck log if you watched my teammate Connor Sintra's video where he kind of explained kind of the future projections of this deck. This is Bermuda Highlander. This is a deck that literally plays a bunch of one-ofs and gets value from it. Because you have cards and access to cards like Reindeer, you have cards access to Laura, which cares about your normal units all being different. And this card in this deck is actually really scary because even though they lost the access to Q-Tire to be able to pinpoint search their one-ofs, Reindeer's still very powerful. The ceiling of the deck is increased with Reindeer, and he still plays the Loris if he has that ride-up option available to him, because then he's able to get the most power out of Somi, which he's able to bounce and recall stuff, and she gives you the double force marker, which you're always going to be going force 1. You just farm a bunch of forces in this deck, and then a Nezca can give you access to the other gift types and protect and excel. Try to say them both at the same time. That did not pan out too well, but yeah, overall these are really good. Plays the Rollick for extra defense, plays the draw crits just for more stability because he still does value the crit sentinel. He really does value the 30k shield. And overall, Heltrata still is the best deck, or the best stride for the deck for Bermuda, because this gives you access to all of your amazing V-Series grade 3s that you got, because she goes back down, kind of like similar to next stage in Gear Chronicle. But yeah, Connor went in depth over this list so much, so please go check out his profile. He did an amazing job, and I know it would make his day if you checked it out. So I'm going to leave Highlander there, as this is a very complex deck to pilot and play. So if you want something a little more introductory, I got the next best thing for you, and that is Premium Riviere. Premium Riviere is what got me started into playing Bermuda Triangle a little bit, and then eventually my girlfriend wanted to get in the game, and she's a music major, so I was like, oh, why not? And so I gifted her Bermuda, and Bermuda is great. So Riviere plays a lot similarly to Raging Form. Of when at the end of the battle she attacks, you can discard 2 cards from your hand, and you get to ride up to 1 Riviere from your hand on to the Vanguard circle, and it gets drive -1. The cool thing, and kind of like the neg though here, is that like it got limited. So it's errata down to where it's a hard once per turn. And that's just the big thing to note, so you can only use this ability once per turn. The other thing, though, is you have access to Freya, which is really impactful right now in the current 2023 BCS meta because of Narukami running around. Freya tells your opponent that my rear guards are never leaving my board due to your effects, so it's pretty strong, just saying that, hey, they can't be affected. GG. Yeah, that's really powerful. And this was the topping list in Malaysia that got 3rd. It plays the Lizelette for extra bounce. So Lizelette can give you just seriously a free card. This is arguably one of the best cards in Bermuda. And thankfully it's printed as a rare and as a common printing. Like, this card is very cheap for its power. So we're very thankful that that card is very accessible to you all. It still plays Heltrata because scaling back down into the Riviere to get another force marker if you have another is very, very strong. You have access to Tirawa, which is an attack extender, so it's a little restender you can have if you build up a bunch of force markers on a rearguard circle. And yeah, that's just kind of general. Riviere's really easy to pilot. It's very fun deck to play. Actually, you have like so many options. You have Tirawa like as a solo restander. You have your Anj play. So yeah, you just get to out the Link Joker matchup between Heltrata and Anj in this deck. It's just super cool. I don't know necessarily why a Puni is being ran on the list. I understand that like you get the on hit, so maybe it's just a free. Maybe he just strictly does it for the on hit. Since I don't see a second copy and there's no Loris in this list, so it could make absolute sense to play it that way. But overall, plays the red OT because this deck kind of does lack the multi-attack function. Because I do not see Selena in the list, so his only true restander is the Super Idol Riviere, which restands when a Riviere is placed on the Vanguard circle. But overall, yeah, deck super fun. Definitely check it out if you want to play it, because it is definitely worth playing. It is a lot of fun, and the second most fun I've had in Bermuda, because I'm going to cover my favorite Bermuda deck right now. You can give me Highlander, you can give me Riviere, you can give me Anj, you can give me whoever you want. I'm taking Prisms at the end of the day. This deck is so cool. This is Prism Image. This is your main grade 3 for the deck. So her ride up turn, you get yourself a triple drive and a force marker, and you get some multi attack. And then when she attacks, you get counterblast 1, return all of your front row to your hand, your rear guards, and then you get to call 1 prism card from your bind zone to your rear guard circle. And also you get to call 2 if your opponent's at grade 3 or greater. So when you scale back down into Heltrada, you get to go in and then play with Vert to get more added bonus. You guys will notice that the Reet is here. This is for decks that kind of like keep you off of advantage. So you're able just to bind a rear guard, draw a card, and then get some restanding action with the Reet, which is important. You have access to the Citron Recious play, which Connor covered. You're able to using the Citron G guard, which is here. You're able to call a grade 1 from your hand, and that gives your Vanguard plus 10,000 power off the Rhesus. So it's free defensives in the deck you always take. You play the Pearl Sisters. These are units that when they see the grade 1 and the grade 2 see each other, because you can only play 1 per copy of a deck, they get a bunch of power and a critical. So then these always scale. Prisms is always going to go Force 1 because their numbers are very, very lackluster too. That's the one thing with Bermuda is like always they're going to go Force 1. So a lot of big value power and a lot of big value game plan in terms of this. You'll notice here this PG changes Limit Break 5 ability to Limit Break 4. Limit Break is a mechanic in Vanguard of where you have a certain damage threshold. Limit Break 5 means you have 5 damage and that ability can activate. Limit Break 4 means they're at 4 damage and that can activate. So you're able to change these Limit Break 5 abilities, such as the Garnet, to give all of your Prism units with their card names a critical, so you can feel that Force 2 type of way, and then you can get that Prism Image Sunshine Vert, not online, but this Limit Break 4 access as well. But overall, this deck is super fun, has a bunch of like neat little tricks it can do. It plays into a Narukami meta very well. I'm very excited to continue to play this deck and keep labbing. So like overall, it does a lot of good work. So do not sleep on this deck. Do not say that, oh, Highlander is the only way to play Bermuda. There are tons of ways to play Bermuda right now inside this meta. But this deck, while it does get a lot of bad rep from the community just because of like stereotypes and stuff, this deck, like ignoring the art, is fantastic. This deck, it feels like a lot of fun. You do a lot of game actions. So if you like picking up your cards, putting them back down, like Bermuda's the clan for you. And there's a lot of good effects in here, and it can teach you a lot about like timing in the game and stuff. So definitely worth it for sure if you want to get rocking with some very, very interesting card effects. But that's going to do it for Bermuda. Let's traverse now to Stargate. We're going to start now into Stargate, and we're going to be talking about Justice. This is Dimensional Police, more specifically the Super Dimensional Robo archetype, which I really only think is the true playable deck inside Premium, unfortunately, for D-Robo. But it's very defensive, and if you like really tanky decks, this is the deck for you. Talk about a deck that has caused me a lot of headaches in terms of guarding because of what it can do. This is my good friend Anderson Williams' list that got top 8 at BCS New York this past season. Very proud of him, but we're gonna dive straight in. So this is a deck all about grade 3s, so if you want to embrace your inner Morikawa from the original series, go right ahead. All of your grade 3 units get plus 10,000 shield when you are on Die Liner. This sets the whole entire standard from the deck because you have a Stride in Geoma Glass that when it's face up in the G zone, all of your grade 3 rear guards get intercept and plus 5,000k power and 5,000k shield. That's also active on your opponent's turn with the power gain. So, as you can see, we love getting shield value in this deck. Your grade 3s on average are going to be about like 25k shield for most of the game. And that's just very, very beneficial. You also have very cool control lanes inside the deck, such as Taser Lage of when your opponent's rear guard is placed other than from hand, you get to rest that unit. So if it's called from like deck, soul, drop, if you don't want it like immediately doing something, you get to rest it. Boom, just like that. What are some other things to highlight? 4-Beat Surrogate made this deck absolutely insane. Being able to grab like Taser Lage or Dizoris is really good because Dizoris gives you an additional drive check if your Vanguard is 35k or greater. And just being able to get that 10k in a drive is really strong. You also have access to grade 2 with Gel Sludge. Just being able to get some free value out of there. So Soul Blast 1, your opponent may counterblast if they did not, you draw a card. If your opponent Soul Blast if they did not, their Vanguard gets neg 5k. But the thing with D-Robo is that these numbers can get exponentially large. We're going to first talk about the OG Stride with X-Gallop. X-Gallop has the burst ability, which matters for a very particular card in this deck. If counterblast 1, you choose a face-down card in your G-Zone, you flip it face-up. When X-Gallop attacks, you get, and its power is 40,000 or greater. You may pay the cost if you do. This unit gets drive +1 at the end of the battle. That unit's power is 80k or greater. You get to stand and it gets drive -4. And at GB3, it gets +10k for each face-up card in your G-Zone. So if you short in Geoma Glass, it's going to get a free 20 and meet that threshold to get an additional drive check. However, there's ways you can abuse that by giving Dizoris more power. Arm is going to check if your opponent's been farming a lot of cards. It's going to punish them for it because it's going to give you all of your front row units plus 30,000 power. So you can hit this threshold really easily, or with Commander Laurel being able to double the power and give a crit to D-Robo. So all of these cards really work well with Force 2. You can choke your opponent out at very low damage because you can threaten like 3 crit and then be like, oh, if I hit a crit on my drive checks, I win. But the other cool thing is that it can get really powerful on its own. Cosmo Winger Unibird Galaxy is crazy. This gets +10k for each card in your damage zone and your rear guards. That's wild. The fact that this can just get a free 100k because you have 5 on board and 5 in damage is stupid. And when it attacks, you get to turn a card face up from your G-Zone. If it's 50k or greater at the end, until the end of that battle, it gets +2 crit. And then if it's 100,000 or greater, you get +2 drive. So this is going to be 5 drive checks if you hit double Dizoris. You can hit up to like 7 drive checks. It's really, really free. But Devlin, can't you just stop all these big number attacks with a perfect guard? But that's what you think. Linka's coming for you. Linka is a burst ability GB2. Put this unit into your soul. If your Vanguard is 20,000 or greater, you get to draw a card. If it is 35k or greater, it gains this following effect. But the Vanguard has to have the burst ability. So it's either only applicable on Unibird Galaxy or X-Gallop. And that is Soul Blast 1. When your drive check reveals a grade 3, you get to choose one of your opponent's Sentinels and nullify the guard. And that unit nullifies the cannot be hit effect. It is super powerful to be able to just say drive check a grade 3 and break a Sentinel. Really hard to do. You have to guard really awkwardly against this deck, and Elementaria is the only thing that saves you in some of those cases because they can't break it. It doesn't go to the Guardian Circle. But this is wild, and the Brant over trigger in this deck is crazy. Be like, hey, yeah, my Vanguard has 4 crit, and now it has 8 and 200 million. With the Sentinel break and it breaks through, you're dead. It's just how it is, and this deck is just so good at doing that. This deck is very tanky. It doesn't care about its rear guards. It has phenomenal matchups into like the bugs matchup and other things. It just does not care. Gets a lot of good value out of its cards, and it's just overall a very phenomenal clan and very easy to learn and to play. It's just expensive because of this Geoma Glass price tag. This card is so good at what it does, is being able to increase your shield and do so much more. But this G-Guard is phenomenal too. You get to resurrect grade 3s from your drop zone that are normal units, and they get 5,000 shield for each card put into your hand, which is more shield in tandem with how this whole entire deck goes. It also has pseudo perfect guards for if a attack swings at you is 25k or less, which is most of the time in the Megacolony matchup. This card is really good against because Megacolony's numbers don't get that big. This is a Soul Blast 1, kill it, and then it gets the Sentinel. You cannot get hit effect. So I couldn't ask for any more, and that's gonna do it really for D Police here, baby. Now we are diving into our second to last clan for this entire series, so thank you for sticking with me. We're going to be going over Link Joker, the other premier control clan inside Cardfight Vanguard that Bushiroad tried to fix because they said the lock mechanic should have never existed. But we're going to go over Starvaders. So this was the first deck type for Link Joker ever that essentially tried to make your opponent's entire board unusable. Through the lock mechanic, you flip a card face down if you played against Messiah, but they keep those cards there. So you keep your opponents off locked zones. So you keep your opponent, just triangle lock them if they're playing a Force or Protect deck so they can't get extra excels. And they have no rearguard swings, like forever. So it's pretty good. But let's get over what Chaos Breaker does. So Chaos Breaker is the main grade 3 for Starvaders. It's when a card is unlocked, you can Soul Blast 1, retire one of those unlocked units, draw a card, and then your opponent removes a total of 2 markers from his or her circles or protect markers from his or her hand. You are then able to get a imaginary gift force for each of those markers removed this way. And so you finally now get gift deletion inside of Premium. And so when you get rid of Excel markers, those units that are on those Excel markers retire because their zone ceases to exist that they are existing on, which is also something really powerful to do. And the reason that this interaction is important is because you have promos such as the Mineral Lady, which is very hard to find. This deck is kind of pricey to build, but I'm also explaining this so that way you guys know when you're playing into it, that she can unlock a card during your battle phase. So as the opponent, she can unlock your card, then the opponent can activate Chaos Breaker's effect to pop one of his rear guards and rip 2 markers. So just be cognizant of that that does happen very frequently, and that they also have access to the G Guardian and Destiny Guardian that does the same, that can unlock too. So be wary of that and be mindful of that, as that is definitely a possibility. And shout out to Jake, by the way, for getting 2nd place in BCS New York with this deck list. Congratulations to going to Worlds, homie. The deck also can now force cards to be put onto the board as locked, so they don't even need existing units to play. So Zirconium puts it from the top of deck as a face down card as locked, and then if your opponent puts that card in the back row because it has to go to an open rearguard circle, unfortunately you give me the chance to draw on that Zirconium to get plus 10,000 power. Globaldia lets you call a card, your opponent chooses a card from the drop zone, they call it as locked, and then Cold Death puts one from the top onto the board as locked. Craven Claw is free advantage. This gets you on hit on the attack and boost to check the top 5 for a Starvader and add it to your hand. No discard, so you have access to the Starvader named PG that draws a card if your opponent has 3 or more locked cards, or the potential Starvader heal trigger that you guys have access to, that's your counter Soul Charge heal. My list plays that when I play Breaker, but you also have access to Paradigm Shift Dragon, which is a crit that goes back to deck and then locks the back row rear guard if your opponent has a locked card. So very, very strong. And then you also have Freeze Ray Dragon, which sometimes is your first ride. So Freeze Ray Dragon actually can lock an opponent's card mid-battle phase when you are dealt a damage. So let's say they swing at you with 1 rear guard and they hit, and then you can just lock the other rear guard and then they're out of like attacks. So they only can swing with their Vanguard and you just PG it. So that's how that works for kind of like the main deck gist. And there's just so many control lines inside Chaos Breaker. You have Burial End if you want to ride into Freeze Ray, defend yourself, and still want to get rid of your opponent's gifts. If they got into the History Collection strides, Burial End removes each and every gift marker, and then he gets plus 10k and a crit for every marker removed. Glue Ball Avalanche is a CB-less way to lock your opponent's front row. The main stride of the deck is Chaos Universe. You can actually select a card from your not select a card from your opponent's hand, but just get to select a rearguard circle for your opponent to choose a card from their hand and place it as locked. And then if you have 2 or more face-up cards in your G zone, you get to lock another unit. Very, very strong that you get to just essentially start choosing your opponent's zones of what is invalidated by them. Deluge is a very interesting card. So Deluge lets you Soul Blast 1, you flip a card face down from your G zone, flip it face up, and you have to discard a card. If you have a heart card with Chaos, your opponent chooses 2 cards from his or her hands. He calls them to the board as locked. Then if they're at 4 or less damage, you choose one of their locked cards and put it to the damage zone face down. So you ping them a damage that's not usable for counterblast. So it's pretty good. You also have access to Death Starvader Glue Ball Dragon, and this Glue Ball has to Persona flip itself. It's why you want to aim to play 4. And you get to Soul Blast 1 and flip a card named Glue Ball face up in the G zone, and then you get to lock a card on your opponent's board for every rear guard or for every face up card in your G zone. So very, very strong in terms of that pressure. And then you get access to Nebula Dragon, Cosmic Dawn Dragon, which is the only way like Chaos Breaker can get advantage, because Chaos Breaker is limited to a 3 attack deck. I think it's like one of the few only decks in Premium that doesn't have like a lot of multi-attack because it has none. off the top of my head, that's where that comes from. But Destiny Guardian is your main G-Guard. Being able to unlock to activate Chaos Breaker's skill during your opponent's turn is very powerful, so do not sleep on that. But Large Wheel can get a little buff for a counter blast. But then Loch Ness Karena, if your opponent's filled with like a bunch of pesky boosters and stuff, like this is pretty good out to Great Nature to turn off their Crayon Tigers and stuff. So yeah, Loch Ness Karena just keeps some games unlocked sometimes because you're able to lock your back row and then lock your opponent's back row. It's pretty good. So yeah, don't sleep on what Chaos Breaker is able to do. Then we're gonna move on into Messiah. So this was Bushiroad's attempt to prevent the lock mechanic. So you would have to lock cards with Messiah, but then unlock them to gain effects. And with new Alter Ego, when any card is unlocked, you get a Soul Blast 1, draw a card, which is pretty good value, but be given History Collection, you're able to go into the new Judgment Messiah that gives you double Force. So while you go Force 1 in Chaos, you're actually going to go Force 2 with Messiah because of this card right here, Volcagode. Volcagode cannot be called, cannot be ridden, like just straight up, like regularly. It cannot like stick there. It has to be placed on the rearguard circle as a locked card. But when you unlock it, then you get this amazing ability to, at the end of the battle, detect a Vanguard. You can lock it and give one of your other units 10k. Which is very free, and peep that it's a 30k base. This card is crazy. Do not sleep on Volcagode, please, because you also get good value out of other cards that self-lock themselves, like White Martyr Yacht. When it's placed, you can counter blast 1, soul blast 1, you choose a card from your drop zone, you put it down as a locked card. And during the battle attack, your opponent can only normal call and only grade 0 calls. Grade 0 card, so only really guard and be able to guard with triggers, and it also resurrects that Volcagode, so it's pretty value. Plus it's a grade 3 you can discard for cost in terms of that, and you also get access to the new Alter Ego Neo Messiah. Also shout out to my boy and my teammate Alex Pereira for sending me this list. This list is actually like pretty cool. I didn't know that this card existed till just right now viewing the list, but I can understand ultimately like what it does for the deck. You also have access to this promo of when this unit is rode upon by grade 3 with Messiah in its card name. You search your deck for up to one grade 3 with Messiah and its card name different from your Vanguard, reveal and put it into your hand and shuffle your deck. So this can automatically fulfill the condition to do the superior stride play to get the double force marker. Already, so you just, oh, I ride this Alter Ego Messiah, I get Alter Ego Neo Messiah, and boom, I discard for cost. Like, it's really good. Don't sleep. Manipulator of the Void, when it hits, you get to put a card from your hand as a locked card for a cost and draw a card. So again, getting dead Volcagodes out of your hand onto the battlefield is pretty good. And then you also get Infrared Swallow, which is a grade fixer, so you can discard this to hopefully hit Lady Battler of the Black Dwarf. But you also can put a top card when it's boosted to top card of your opponent's deck. If it's grade 1 or greater, you get to push it down on the locked circle, or a locked card down from the top of the deck as a locked card on a rearguard circle. So again, very, very powerful. You have access to a lot here. You have access to actually the D-Series Meselix, which can do a bunch of different things to stand them and just get some multi-attack that way. You have access to Cosmic Dawn, which is an actual just true value engine inside this deck. You also have access to Genesis Dragon Ballistus Messiah. When this unit attacks, if you have a heart card with Messiah, you can choose a locked card and a rear guard in any player's field for each face-up card in your G-Zone. You may lock or unlock them, and then if you unlocked one or more card, you draw a card. So you can lock down your opponent's board while unlocking yours, which is pretty strong, and then you get to draw a card out of it. You can also integral Messiah people, and when this is placed on Vanguard Circle, if the number of face-up Messiah in your G-Zone is 3 or more, all fighters return all of their cards' hands to their deck, shuffle them, and then draws 5 cards. So your opponent was playing Great Nature, it's playing a deck that just farms a bunch of cards. Being able to set their hand to 5 and then do a bunch of multi-attack is pretty strong, because when it does swing, you get to counterblast and choose a flip a card face up in your G-Zone and unlock all of your locked cards. You unlock 3 or more, you soul charge, draw a card, and this unit gets plus 10k. So you're able to unlock your Volcagodes, go crazy. Just really overall a lot of good value. Messiah is what we classify as like the aggro combo deck, as where like you have a bunch of combo lines that you try to fulfill to hit like your certain thresholds, and then you're able to finish out the game and close very, very efficiently. So don't sleep. This deck has so much to access to itself, as I accidentally went back to the beast, the next deck list we're going to cover. But overall, Messiah is very, very a strong pick. and also Chaos, so you kind of get the best of both worlds in terms of wanting to play different Link Joker decks. There's also Deleter that you have access to, but there's nothing like really good pure Deleterless. You kind of mix it with Messiah to get some good advantage because you set your opponent's Vanguard to blanket nothing and 0 power, but it just is not really that good on its own, so I much more rather cover a like pure Messiah list that has a lot of good combos. So again, shout out Alex for the list, and I hope you enjoy the next clan as we roll into our good old Gundam robots. For our final Stargate clan, we're going to be talking about the last sect of robots, and this is Nova Grappler. This deck is all about its rear guards, and let me tell you, restanding and doing a bunch of combo stuff is what this deck loves to see. We're talking first start about the Victor deck, and Victor has actually kind of popped up as on the cusp of a meta-relevant deck in terms of its high roll potential because of the Vic-10 Stride. The Vic-10 Stride getting an update in History Collection, letting you get the double Oxel to drawing 2 cards, getting more zones to have more restanders be placed on, has really shaken up the premium scene and has to have some cards just have straight up some cards in deck to counter this matchup, because out of nowhere this deck can just straight up kill you. So Vic-10's end on hit and end of battle lets you restand a unit and give it 5k, while Victor gives the Vanguard a skill for a counterblast on swing to restand a unit. So off the Stride alone, you're restanding 2 cards, which is very, very powerful. Then the deck is chocked full of restanders between Golsachi restanding and letting you restand another card if you have a Victor Vanguard. For a counterblast, Cool Hank does a restand for a discard, and the new Spiral Breaker can restand an entire column for free. So good value. But where do you get value and where do you get power out of this? Well, you get power out of Zazanda and power out of Maoyaki. Maoyaki is going to boost the unit in front of it and give it the effect to give 4k to 2 units, including itself, which is very powerful. Like, Maoyaki is a very strong card if you're able to have multiple combo lines inside the deck. I'm just restanding that same unit in that column with Maoyaki over and over again. The same can be true, though, said about Zazanda, but Zazanda also buffs himself by 5k and the unit that restood by 5k. So very, very powerful when he sees another card restood. This guy can get very big very quickly for kind of no reason. Gunston is here to protect your rear guards because, of course, every restand combo deck is very susceptible to G-Guard interactions from Narukami, Granblue, you name it, it's coming. Gunston can give 5 units resist, meaning they can't be affected by card effects, and then when it's stood, you get a bunch of power based on the amount of cards in your G-Zone off Gunston. Victor's very interesting, though, because it has a plethora of strides minus the Vic-10. It can go Bustard, which Bustard, every time a card is restood, you can Soul Blast 1, flip a card face up in your G-Zone, and Bustard gets a drive check. And at the end of the battle, Bustard attacked, you can discard 3 cards and restand him with drive -5. So very powerful Stride. It can get huge in the drive checks. I've seen Buster get up to like 8 drive checks. It's been pretty scary. You also have Asdabulk, which can be kind of your out to Megacolony. You can just kind of force your front row to restand and then get Asdabulk a bunch of power if that's the game plan. You also have Favorite Champ Victor, which you can continue to be restanding your units. Very, very strong. You have access also to Dryger, which is a great finisher. It gives all your cards the ability to restand right after they swing. It's pretty good because it can continue comboing off. The other thing too to note is the ability for some cards to just provide really good value. Break Pass being added to the deck as a defensive draw just lets you see your combo pieces faster. This deck is like great at letting you do that. And overall, it's just a very, very solid Victor list. Having your G-Guards access to be able to countercharge you, so that way you're not like damage stars as hard. Nova Grapplers has great G-Guards for. They have Doga Titan, which can flip itself face back down and be an out to the Link Joker that we just previously covered because it gets to flip that card face up, or can flip it damage face up. You have the double countercharge if you have no face up CB. You can sub all of your counterblast face down to get the double countercharge if need be, just to get some value and draw some cards off that G-Guard, and then Gun Greed is always going to give you a countercharge every time an attack misses. So overall, pretty solid G-Guards. Not fantastic G-Guards, but solid ones at that to recuperate your resources back. And then Dismal, of course, to protect any one of your very valuable restanders you have inside the deck. Zubat can also give you some good value, just being able to countercharge, letting you activate some on-stride effects and stuff like that. It's just very, very good. So don't sleep on Zubat either. Victor overall, though, very strong deck. I think you have to respect this as a sleeper like how you have to Yasuye. So please respect Victor at all costs. But there's more ways to play Nova Grappler, and next we're going to be talking about Beast Deity. This is a deck that loves to attack during the main phase. You can set up a bunch of stands and stuff, and Illuminal can get big. The thing here, though, is when it's placed on Vanguard, you can counterblast one, draw a card, and then choose a card from your hand, call it to rearguard, and attack your opponent's Vanguard with that unit. If it did not hit, you get to stand. So you start your battle phase early with this deck, which is very cool. Because you have a bunch of restanders inside Beast Deity that do little combo lines. And you're actually really able to abuse the new 2022 Strident Merciless Dragon to just start this whole battle phase during your main phase, and then go into battle phase with all your units restood and just start going to town. So overall, pretty strong. There's a lot of tools inside here with the nitty-gritties. This deck is pretty cheap, actually. I think the only high-value card is Ethics Buster Catastrophe, which is the main stride, because you have to have 4 of this, because you have to choose a face-down card from your G-Zone, flip it face-up. If you have a Heart card with Beast Deity in this card name, Catastrophe gets when your drive check reveals a grade 1 or greater Beast Deity. You get to stand one of your rear guards. If you have 2 or more face-up cards named Ethic Buster Catastrophe in your G-Zone, that unit gets plus 3k until the end of turn. So you just get free restands that can give you more power, like Illuminal and other things. So whenever another unit's attack hits, Illuminal can just get scalarly bigger. And of course, you're going Excel, so you're getting more rearguard circles, more options and abilities to hit your opponent. Jackal's a free restander, which is really important to highlight, as well as being able to stand one of your units with Liftaros, just so that way, if it does hit and you don't get the restand, you can force the restand with Liftaros. But overall, pretty simple. Nothing too stellar here. It kind of has the same access sweep to all the G-Guards that you play in Victor. Just plays a little differently. Not the strongest. I still think Victor's the strongest deck, but we have one last option, and that is the Blau deck. So Blau actually does a whole combo line where they can re-ride multiple times through the bind zone and get a bunch of effects. Galaxy Blau Cougar during your turn. If you have a Blau Cougar in Soul, all of your grade 3 units with Blau on their card name get plus 10k. And then when it attacks, you can call up to one Stern Blau Cougar from your Soul to rearguard circle. And then when it's run upon by a Blau, you get to call that card to rear circle. So kind of its own pseudo loop. And then we're going to get to Stern Blau Cougar now. So during your turn, if you have a Blau Cougar in your Soul, all of your grade 3 units again get 10k. And at the end of the battle attack, you can discard 2 cards. You choose a Galaxy Blau Cougar on your rearguard circle, bind it, and ride that card to stand. And this unit gets drive -1 until the end of turn. So again, you get to re-ride, make more Excel markers, and get to go crazy. The Blau Ride Chain lets you look and find all of your Blau units that you need between Blau Panzer, Blau Kluger, and of course the Blau Junger. You also have this Blau that gets you a little bit of advantage in countercharging and stuff like that. You also love to play this Beast Deity Frogmaster because you have some strides from Blau that are limit break 4, and you don't want to lose access to those, like this being able to re-ride. Blazer Blau Cougar being able to re-ride is very, very powerful. You should not sleep on that. Having Forbidal in the deck gives you free access to your Blau Cougar engine, so that way you can't miss out on that. Having that be extra copies of Stern and Galaxy is very, very impactful. But overall, yeah, and this deck actually gets to abuse the ability to play these newly errataed Blau triggers, because these are now searchable out of the top for when you get to look with cards with Blau in their card name. These have Blau in their card name, so overall, very, very solid. A lot of cool different combo lines. There's just so much to talk about inside No Grappler because there's so minor micro plays. The other thing though is the Sonia Blau Cougar. You can choose 3 cards from your hand, discard them at the end of the battle. You can play the cost. If you do, you put this unit face up in your G zone. You choose 1 grade 3 card from your hand and you ride it a stand. So again, you just get to go more into this combo plays to re-ride the Blau Kluger and just go more crazy. Just you get to set up so much. So don't sleep on this deck. This deck can do some wild stuff. I still think Victor is better though, because the surprise factor just kind of out of nowhere on that ride up turn is very deadly. So definitely you can't sleep on Victor, but Beast Deity and Blaus are just really good options too if you're looking for more of a budget friendly era deck rather than Victor. But hey, that's gonna do it for all 24 clans. So I got a little outro here, so let's recap what we just talked about. And there you have it. 3 whole hours of just discussing various premium options that you have in terms of deck decisions and in clans and so many different playstyles that you have. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. This was an absolutely grueling process to talk about all of these decks, but it's absolutely a format I love, and I'm so thankful that I got to share my insight with you and be able to show off some of my friends' very exciting lists. please, if you haven't considered already, please subscribe as I get to continue this series, as we will talk about the stride mechanic overall in the next episode. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe, and I hope you all are having a wonderful rest of your day and a wonderful rest of your week. I love you all, and take care.